Chun actually hadn't left the pavilion. He wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he was waiting at the entrance door. Chun actually hadn't left the pavilion. He wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he was waiting at the entrance door. You slightly exceeded the time limit. Next time, please pay attention, said Protector Bay while looking at Chun and shaking his head. I slightly exceeded the time limit, but there's another guy who's been in there for ages, way over the time limit. I want to see what will happen to him, thought Chun waiting for Lin Feng to come down. Lin Feng didn't make Chun wait for too long. A short time after, he also came down looking relaxed as if there was no problem at all. Protector Bay, here are the skills and agility technique that I chose, said Lin Feng while glancing at Chun. Lin Feng handed skill and agility technique books over to the Protector Bay while smiling in a friendly way. Purity technique. It will help you consolidate your agility basics. It is definitely worth learning, said Protector Bay while looking at the agility technique and skills which Lin Feng had chosen. He was nodding with agreement. He then added, 8 Strikes of Desolation is at the bottom of the Xian level skills, yet it is an extremely powerful skill. It is hard to learn and practice, but considering your abilities, it should not be too much of a problem. Concerning the Sword of Nirvana, which is a triple strike attack, everybody can learn it, but only a real genius can master it to perfection. People who manage to master it to perfection are really rare. You will have to make great efforts to achieve such a mastery of this skill. Protector Bay was still looking at the agility technique and skills that Lin Feng had chosen and continued to give his opinion. If someday by any chance you manage to carry out these 3 hits using the Sword of Nirvana at full strength, then don't learn another skill which is at the bottom of the Xian level or even an average Xian level. Directly move on and learn a high Xian level skill. However, if you manage to master the skill, you will not have a problem even if it collides with a high-level Xian skill. Lin Feng was smiling when he heard what the old man was telling him. The gap between the different sublevels of the Xian level was colossal, but if Lin Feng managed to master that skill, he would still be able to carry out amazingly strong attacks which could match a high-level Xian skill. At the side of the pavilion, Protector Bay and Lin Feng were talking and laughing cheerfully. The more they talked, the uglier and angrier Chun's face looked. It looked like Lin Feng and Protector Bay were actually friends. No wonder Lin Feng took such liberties. He was on the first floor for a long time, more than that allocated within an oil lamp, said Chun interrupting them in the middle of their conversation, which made Protector Bay smile. He then turned his head and looked at Chun. I know, said Protector Bay calm and unperturbed. Since you know that he violated the rules of the sect, shouldn't he be severely punished? Chun hadn't expected Protector Bay to admit it in such a straightforward way, while looking like he was feeling completely at ease. He was feeling even more furious. Protector Bay looked at Chun with a strict look. He shook his head and then said, I've been here for many years. No matter who, elite disciples or even core disciples, have to go through me when they want to enter the Xingchun Pavilion. What do you think? Are you implying that you are trying to teach me, with my many years of experience, how to do my job? Protector Bay was an extraordinary person. The patriarch of the Yunhai sect, Nangong Ling, showed a lot of respect to him when he saw him. In his eyes, common ordinary disciples were tiny individuals with no power, nothing more. Even if it was the top-ranking ordinary disciples, it was still a tiny individual with no power, a nobody who was not worth his time. It would even be a struggle for elite disciples to be considered less than a tiny insignificant power in front of this protector. Lin Feng was an exception. The first time he had met Lin Feng, he had had an extremely good first impression. He immediately had the impression that Lin Feng was polite and wise beyond his years. Later, he had also found out that Lin Feng was extremely gifted, especially when he had made the 8 drums beat. Therefore, he held Lin Feng in the highest of esteem. What did Chun think? How could he allow himself to interrogate the old man like he had done? How could Protector Bay treat him with esteem? When Chun heard Protector Bay's words, his face started looking demonic. He then said in an extremely cold way, Your only job is just to guard the Xingchun Pavilion. You dare not apply the rules of the sect. That is a very serious crime against the sect. How dare you? Lin Feng was speechless and shocked by Chun's words. No wonder he was such an imbecile when it came to cultivation and relied on his spirit to achieve minor results. That guy didn't have the least bit of wisdom in his heart. What did that guy think he was doing when threatening Protector Bay and accusing him of having committed a serious crime? The top-ranked ordinary disciple. That guy was living in a dream. He was so used to thinking he was a valuable and noteworthy talent that he had forgotten his place. Protector Bay looked at Chan Chan in a way which clearly showed how ridiculous he thought Chan Chan was. The old man had worked there for a great many years and had never experienced such a thing. He also never got angry, and then at that moment, an ordinary disciple had dared come to him and interrogate him, and then tell him that he had committed a crime. Protector Bay was shaking his head. He started opening his mouth but looked like he was still thinking about what to say when his facial expression suddenly changed and shouted, "Get lost!" After saying these two words, an insane strength burst out and crashed onto Chun Chen's body. At that moment, Protector Bay's eyes were filled with a sharp killing light. His body was unleashing an extremely strong qi. Chun Chen had just felt the extremely strong power against his body, and had ended up kneeling down on the ground shaking from head to toe. Chun Chen wasn't the only one who was shaking from head to toe with fear. People inside the Xingqian pavilion had also been shocked by the loud shout. Some of them had come to see what was happening, and saw the protector's body surrounded by such a strong and powerful qi. They all kept quiet with fear. As it turned out, that old man who looked sluggish was actually as strong or even stronger than the elders within the sect, and looked like a powerful deity to the disciples. The old man's strength was genuinely powerful without question. It was well known that when breaking through to the Ling Qi layer from the Qi layer, cultivators acquired a mysterious and profound strength. When breaking through to the Xian Qi layer from the Ling Qi layer, it was said that the cultivator's three energies, the Qi, the Shun and the Jing, fused together, which enabled the cultivator to acquire a genuinely pure and immense power. The Qi inside the body became genuinely pure like the Qi of heaven and earth. A tiny bit of that pure power contained an extremely condensed Qi, and when it was used in an attack, it could destroy an entire mountain. Protector Bay's shout had actually released that genuinely pure power. The power that had crashed onto Chan Chen's body wasn't immensely strong because Protector Bay had controlled his power perfectly, but it had revealed the fact that he was an extremely strong cultivator who had broken through to the Xian Qi layer. Xian Qi layer. That was an incomparably strong cultivation level. He could easily become an elder in the Yunhai sect. "I will be taking my leave," said Chan Chan while pale but still looking at Lin Feng with an evil look, and added, "Piece of trash relying on other people's strength. If you join the elite exam at that moment, I will take good care of you." When saying those words, Chan Chan turned around and left with his head held high. Lin Feng shook his head while looking at Chan Chan. Even though that guy was the top-ranked ordinary disciple, he was extremely arrogant and thought he was better than others. He didn't know anything else but the small place in which he lived and thought he had seen and knew everything. He really did not understand how large the world was and did not know that hidden dragons lay everywhere. Protector Bay's strength was immense. He wouldn't even spare a glance at a cultivator like Chan Chan who was ranked at the top of ordinary disciple. Why would he go out of his way to do favors for Lin Feng? If Chan Chan had even the slightest wisdom, then he would come to the conclusion that he had met someone he could not offend. Besides, everything that had happened was all part of Chan Chan, attempting to show his dominance over Lin Feng. By attempting to show off, he had humiliated himself several times. "It's been a long time since I had to do something like this. I am much too old for things such as this," thought Protector Bay. Then he said, "Shuiyu, when I leave, you'll be in charge of the Xingqian pavilion." After he finished talking, his body started shaking and wings of a crane appeared. Then he flew high up in the air and disappeared. The crowd was stupefied. They had seen how he had suddenly vanished into the horizon. What a terrifying power. He could even fly. What kind of power was this old man hiding? That old man could travel over 10 kilometers in the blink of an eye. That required an extremely profound power. The crowd had the feeling they were in a dream. The sluggish-looking old man who guarded the Xingqian pavilion had suddenly shown his real power. At that moment, they hated themselves for not noticing and never asking the old man for advice. They had all ignored him. They had eyes but did not recognize Mount Tai. Lin Feng was stupefied as well. His heart was pounding in amazement. Protector Bay was a million times stronger than he was. Much stronger than he had originally thought. A middle-aged man entered the Xingqian pavilion. That was the one Protector Bay had called before leaving. Shueyu. At that moment on the highest mountain on the Yunhai sect, in the room of a temple, a gigantic qi was filling the atmosphere. Many people had gathered in that room and it looked like they were debating about something. Fei, I will consider this with great attention. You should stop worrying, said the patriarch of the Yunhai sect, Nan Gongling, while smiling. He was speaking to Lu Fei, who was sitting next to him. Behind Lu Fei were a multitude of people wearing the same attire. They were all wearing noble red armor. They were precisely the people Lin Feng had seen at the foot of the mountain. They were the troops who were riding Qi Shui armored horses. When she heard Nan Gongling's answer, Lu Fei's beautiful eyebrows frowned. Nan Gongling hadn't replied happily. In fact, it could be seen that he was not happy in the slightest. But Lu Fei could understand him. Letting some of the best disciples of the Yunhai sect leave with her was a difficult decision. Each of the Yunhai sect disciples would go on to have children who represented a great future for the sect. How could Nan Gongling abandon any of them easily? Uncle Nan Gongling, you know that my father is not a selfish person. It is fate, and it is for the benefit of the Shueyu country. He will definitely let them come back to the Yunhai sect. He will treat them well. At that moment, they will all be able to assume a high status and will become pillars of the sect. Lu Fei continued her argumentation. Your father and I practiced cultivation together, grew up together. We love each other like brothers. If he stayed in the Yunhai sect, he could have become the patriarch of the sect. How could I, Nan Gongling, not know what kind of man he is? The thing is that now, as the patriarch of the Yunhai sect, everything I do, I must do it considering what is good and bad for the sect first. I cannot selfishly decide things myself. Nan Gongling didn't elaborate more at that moment. He remembered all the things he and Lu Tsonglan used to do together without thinking of the consequences of their actions. They were two geniuses of the Yunhai sect. But these days, as the patriarch of the sect, he couldn't act irresponsibly anymore. When Lu Fei heard Nan Gongling's speech, she heaved a sigh. Actually, she could understand the difficult position in which Nan Gongling found himself. Yet, she was concerned about her father, who also had to bear huge responsibilities. She was really trying her best to help him by any means possible. When Lu Fei heard Nan Gongling's speech, she heaved a sigh. Actually, she could understand the difficult position in which Nan Gongling found himself. Yet, she was concerned about her father, who also had to bear huge responsibilities. She was really trying her best to help him by any means possible. Patriarch Nan Gongling. Building the holy courtyard of Shueyu is an order of His Majesty. Could you refuse to obey His Majesty's orders? Said a young man who was next to Lu Fei while staring at Nan Gongling. When did I say that I wanted to disobey His Majesty's orders? Nan Gongling replied coldly while glancing at the young man. He then said, building the holy courtyard of Shueyu is a project which I support wholeheartedly. I have no choice but to let a few outstanding disciples go and practice there. He paused for a moment and then continued in a cold tone. Besides, since when did you start to think it was good manners to poke your nose into other people's affairs and make criticisms? A little prince like you. What do you intend to do? Do you want me to call your father, Duan Tianlang, and have him teach you some manners? In the continent of the 9 clouds, elders had to be respected. Nobles also had to be respected, which was especially true of those with high status, as they were extremely strong. These days, the Duan clan had become the imperial clan because they were extremely strong. The Duan clan had become the strongest clan in the entire Shueyu country. It wasn't just a matter of how much territory was controlled, it was a fact that they were the strongest. However, the Duan clan still had to humble themselves to the sects and act politely when speaking with them. Nan Gongling wasn't going to submit himself to a little prince of the Duan clan. It did not matter to him how strong the Duan clan was. His sect was not something that could be looked down upon by anyone. Nan Gongling, I will tell my father about this, said the young man coldly while giving a glare filled with evil intentions. Tell him whatever you like, replied Nan Gongling while looking relaxed and not surprised. I heard that little Fei came back. At that moment, a voice came from outside of the room in the temple. It was Protector Bei, who had just arrived while striding forward with head high. Grandfather Bei. When Lu Fei saw Protector Bei, she stood up. Protector Bei was actually her father's master. Little Fei, how's your father doing? Protector Bei was looking at Lu Fei with affectionate eyes. The great elders and protectors of the sect rarely had direct disciples. When they did, they developed deep and strong ties with them which would last a lifetime. He's still in Duanren City, said Lu Fei making a wry smile. Phew, sighed Protector Bei shaking his head and making a wry smile as well. Little Fei, what brings you here? If you are looking for disciples, then I have an amazing person in mind. You will definitely be happy. One person, said Lu Fei making a wry smile again. Didn't your father leave the sect alone in the past? You don't need too many people. It's useless to take too many, said Protector Bei while shaking his head. Grandfather, who are you talking about? Lu Fei's eyes had a glimmer of hope. When she heard the old man, she had the feeling he was talking about somebody extremely important. Could it be? You will know when the right moment comes. Make those guys leave first. After the elite disciple exam of the Yunhai sect, I will personally accompany the person to the imperial city, said Protector Bei while looking at the crowd of troops behind Lu Fei. All right, said Lu Fei while nodding. In the mountains where he had first met Lu Fei, Lin Feng was sitting in a cave and cultivating. The qi of heaven and earth looked like a cocoon which was surrounding him as he continued to cultivate. Lin Feng's body was wrapped up in the cocoon-like qi. That white-colored qi looked like an extremely dense fog which had almost become solid. At that moment, a terrifying attractive force emerged out of the deepest parts of Lin Feng's body, which enabled the qi of heaven and earth that surrounding his body to penetrate into his dantian. Inside Lin Feng's body, a powerful milky white qi was circulating and looked as if it was boiling. The strong qi which circulated in and out of Lin Feng's body was extremely pure. After a long time, the qi of heaven and earth was still uninterruptedly revolving around Lin Feng's body. At that moment, Lin Feng stopped cultivating. He opened his eyes and had a big smile on his face. This purity technique has such strange effects on the body, but it definitely helped consolidate my cultivation basics. Now, I am much stronger than before. I can utilize my power much better than before. I can control my breathing much better than before as well. Lin Feng thought that thanks to his increased breathing abilities, he would be able to endlessly fight. A continuous explosive strength required a great power, and of course every fight required control over one's breathing. Lin Feng stood up, looked at a wall at the entrance of the cave, then thrust his palm forward into the air and whispered, 8 strikes of desolation. Accompanying his words, a strong and explosive attack crashed into the wall in front of him. Boom! 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 The entire cave was vibrating. 7 clear and distinct marks could be seen on the wall which Lin Feng had taken as a target. As expected, 8 strikes of desolation is an extremely strong attack. Lin Feng was smiling. 8 strikes of desolation was one of the lowest skills of the Xian level. Good have up to 8 strikes. If a cultivator managed to achieve 5 strikes, that was already extremely strong and proved that he had great talent. If he could manage to go up to 6 strikes, he was definitely a rare talent, but achieving 7 strikes could only be done by a real genius. Lin Feng wanted to achieve 8 strikes. Achieving 8 strikes would fill the entire atmosphere with power. However, achieving the 8th strike was extremely difficult, and only real geniuses could achieve it. It usually required a lot of battle experience to fully comprehend the skill and master it to perfection. Xian-level skills were not easy to practice, and the higher the level in strength, the more difficult they became. However, as far as Lin Feng was concerned, he could see no problem with practicing. When releasing his dark spirit, it gave him the amazing ability of increased comprehension and understanding. After one day, he had been able to master 7 strikes. He just had to practice a bit more and he would be able to master the 8 strikes of desolation skill to perfection and achieve all 8 strikes when using the skill. But Lin Feng wasn't satisfied at that moment. Elite disciples had nothing in common with ordinary disciples, and Lin Feng wanted to climb above all others. During the elite disciple exam of the Yunhai sect, there could be a real genius within the disciples. Lin Feng didn't know how it was going to be, but the stronger his competition was, the better. Sword of Nirvana would greatly improve his strength in a very short time as well. The Sword of Nirvana skill was actually a sword skill with 3 strikes which would grow in strength with the higher mastery of the sword. 1 strike could mean death, 3 strikes would mean certain death. A deadly sword. A fatal sword. A lonely sword. It could annihilate everything that stood in its way, so it had annihilated everything in its path. It had nothing left that was its equal and was therefore lonely. While reading the Sword of Nirvana skill book, Lin Feng was lost in thought. He looked at the text and the stances while gradually absorbing all of the knowledge. Lin Feng could rapidly understand everything. Lin Feng had started to release his spirit. Lin Feng's world became a world filled with darkness again. The earth, the sky, not a single color or light could be seen. There was only darkness surrounding everything. Lin Feng was calm and unperturbed in that world of darkness. Nothing could disturb him and he was extremely calm. Lin Feng closed his eyes and the image of a person appeared in his brain. That person looked like a holy man and didn't stop wielding his long sword. One strike, another strike, repeating the same movement over and over again. He was practicing the Sword of Nirvana. The deadly sword. After a long time, Lin Feng opened his eyes. The twinkling sword lacerating the air disappeared. One step, one strike, the deadly sword. Boom! The entire cave was shaking and trembling. The sword had left a large scar in the wall of the cave. The cave was shaking and trembling more and more. The rocks had been crushed into nothing but dust. Lin Feng was stupefied. Lin Feng had quickly retreated from the cave and not long after, the cave collapsed on itself with a violent rumble. The first strike was already so deadly. Combined with the 8 strikes of desolation, he had completely destroyed the cave. He had only mastered the first strike of the Sword of Nirvana and the 7th strike of the 8 strikes of desolation, yet he had already collapsed a cave. These were indeed powerful skills. Lin Feng recalled his spirit back into his body. He was very excited. Xian level skills were definitely extremely powerful, as expected. Was the power of all his skills going to be so incredible? What Lin Feng didn't know was that the first strike was already devastating because he also knew how to control forces. He had unconsciously controlled the sword force at a very advanced level and combined it with his strike. That deadly sword required a perfect fusion of his sword chi. Mastery of the skill and sword force. These 3 elements had to be in a perfect symbiotic fusion. Ling Feng's ability to comprehend and use the sword force so freely had made things much easier for him. That is why it wasn't that difficult for him to practice the skill. If it had been someone else, it would have been much more difficult, maybe even impossible to learn the skill in such a short period. Who? Lin Feng had come out from the cave, turned around and looked around him at the mountains where the sun rays shone through. He could see someone walking in the distance. When he recognized the person, Lin Feng felt a sudden urge to take revenge which he suppressed. Lu Fei. Lin Feng was surprised. He didn't understand what she was doing there. She had had the opportunity to attack him before, and she hadn't seized it. Why? Bastard, you took control over my territory. Today you and me are enemies. You are the only one who has humiliated me to such an extent. Lu Fei was staring at Lin Feng with a deep and bitter hatred for him. Since she was a child, her father had taught her to stand alone and be independent. She had always been like that. She was more of a tomboy and didn't really act like a girl in the slightest. Besides, she had gone through a lot of hardships which made her even more proud and ambitious. But Lu Fei hadn't expected Lin Feng to be so shameless. He was a voyeur and had pounced naked onto her only to be beaten back, and then when they next fought he had dared to say he wasn't interested in her anymore only because he had made great progress with his cultivation. Then, he had dared to steal her precious and beloved territory. How could she not be angry? Now I have broken through to the Ling Qi layer. We will see if you still dare act so insolent towards me. Lu Fei thought tyrannically. I have already defeated you 3 times. Apologize to me and I might show mercy and let you off. Lu Fei said in an ice-cold tone. Defeated 3 times? Show mercy? Lin Feng laughed, shook his head and said, just leave already before it becomes too embarrassing for you to stay. Lu Fei and Lin Feng had already met a few times. Lin Feng knew how proud and arrogant that girl was, so she would not accept others' help and would use her own power. Therefore, when Yu Hao, an elite disciple, wanted to help her to kill Lin Feng, she refused even though she just had nod once and Yu Hao would kill Lin Feng. She still didn't do it. Then, at the foot of the mountain, with these cavaliers on Qi Shui armored horses, Lu Fei had said in a cold voice that they were fellow disciples within the sect. She didn't try to get her revenge with numbers. Therefore, even though Lin Feng thought that that girl was quite detestable, He didn't think that she was evil or malicious. Maybe during the first time Lin Feng had come to her place, she had really believed that he was a pervert and that it was no accident at all. Embarrassing. Lu Fei was looking at Lin Feng looking horribly self-confident now she had a breakthrough. You should go home. My father gave me a silver xian bao. If you do not leave quickly, then I will let you taste its arrows. Lu Fei grabbed the silver bao she was carrying on her back. It diffused a dazzling light and the sun was reflecting from every inch of the bao. She put an arrow into the bao, made a small step and bent down. Her movements looked smooth and agile. Her beautiful body, her clothes and her movements were in perfect harmony. She looked very attractive, but that beauty was hiding her dangerous power. Whoosh! The sound of a bowstring vibrating could be heard as the arrow shot through the air at incredible speed. Its dazzling light made it look like it was on fire. It was heading directly towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng was stupefied. The arrow was approaching so quickly that escaping seemed impossible. He quickly moved from the path of the arrow and struck his sword against the incoming arrow. The arrow flew past Lin Feng and crashed into the side of a cave which was behind him. Boom! Behind Lin Feng, rocks were falling from the cave and half of the rock face had been destroyed. It had been crushed by Lu Fei's arrow. That attack was quite violent and contained a great deal of power. Huh! Lin Feng was surprised. He could feel the power from her Ling Qi layer. So Lu Fei had broken through to the Ling Qi layer. No wonder that she wanted to fight with him again. Lu Fei was very young and had yet already broken through to the Ling Qi layer. She was a really outstanding talent. She was about as strong as Lin Qian and Na Lan Feng. Considering these things, her arrogance would be inevitable. However, she was not as vicious and petty as Lin Qian and did not look down on others like Na Lan Feng. Also, her status was much higher than that of Lin Qian or Na Lan Feng. One could notice it from the moment she was seen with the cavalry troop, which contained troops much stronger than the ones he had slaughtered during the night before the annual tournament. As expected, sword skills are indeed very powerful. Her arrows were much quicker than before. She had also become much stronger as well. Her arrows could even exceed the speed of sound as they ripped through the air. The whistling sound of the arrow could be heard only after the arrow had reached its target, or maybe the sound would be heard after the arrow had already pierced its opponent. Killing people with these arrows would be extremely easy for her. Bow and arrow techniques were terrifying and cultivators who used them were extremely respected. Their attacks were fast and precise while carrying extremely powerful destructive force. Unfortunately for her, Lu Fei's strength was still not extremely developed. It was incomparable with that of some extremely advanced cultivators who used bows and arrows. You're lucky, Lu Fei said to Lin Feng while looking at him. She put another arrow in the bow and said, I'll give you another chance. No need. I am not guilty of anything. I don't need to apologize or to beg you, Lin Feng said while shaking his head. He started walking towards Lu Fei. You're bringing about your own destruction, shouted Lu Fei furiously. An arrow then pierced through the air. 8 strikes of desolation. Lin Feng raised his hand and thrust out 3 strikes which collided with the arrow, and with each strike it gradually lost strength until it eventually fell helpless onto the ground. 8 strikes of desolation, Xian level skill, Ling Qi layer. Lu Fei thought while shivering in fear. When she saw that Lin Feng knew the skill 8 strikes of desolation, she understood that Lin Feng had also broken through to the Ling Qi layer. No wonder he had remained so insolent. She had realized her mistake. She immediately turned around and started running at an incredible speed in the opposite direction. Lin Feng was baffled and had no idea what she was doing. Then he saw Lu Fei bending over. Her body had a perfect arch shape. That beauty was still hiding her killing intent, and she would not let go of her revenge so easily. Whoosh! An arrow shot through the air with a whistling sound, but this time it was even faster and stronger than a moment ago. Lin Feng wasn't scared. He was as confident as before. He started his 8 strikes of desolation attack again. This time he used 4 strikes. Damn! How many strikes can that guy do using 8 strikes of desolation? Lu Fei whispered as she swore at Lin Feng in her heart. She suddenly released her spirit. A beautiful and resplendent golden arrow spirit appeared. It looked very different from the last time. This time there were 3 arrows behind her back. Her spirit was emitting such a strong qi that it made Lin Feng shake. Besides, Lu Fei's spirit had been awakened as expected. Lu Fei's arrow spirit flew up in the air, and following it, Lu Fei also jumped in the air. High up in the air, the arrows were accurately aiming at Lin Feng. At the same time, Lu Fei was holding her silver bow and had loaded it with 3 arrows as well. 3 cruel and deadly arrows. Meteor fall. Lu Fei looked serene and calm. Her body floated high up in the air as 6 arrows were shot and pierced through the air. The arrow spirit definitely had great advantages. Not only was it able to automatically aim at somebody, but it was also able to aim at a specific body part. At that moment, Lin Feng had the feeling that the arrow spirit was aiming at his soul, which made him feel like his very being was being suppressed by the arrows. These arrows are so powerful. Lin Feng was feeling gloomy, and immediately, he started his 8 strikes of desolation attack using both hands. 14 strikes had blotted out the sky and covered up the earth, moving straight towards the incoming arrows. Boom boom boom. Explosion sounds filled the air, and an extremely strong wind blew onto Lin Feng's disciple robes. After these apocalyptic attacks vanished, Lu Fei appeared again in a cloud of dust. She was crouching down and was breathing heavily. How can he be this strong? Lu Fei was looking at Lin Feng and wondering how she would get her revenge. Seemed impossible. She was completely astonished. After she broke through to the Ling Qi layer, her father himself had assisted her in her training. She had been practicing every day with no rest. She had greatly increased her breathing abilities and her combat skills. She had greatly increased her strength, and her attacks now contained explosive power within each arrow. Thanks to her spirit, she was now even able to shoot 6 arrows at the same time. She was extremely talented as a disciple of the first Ling Qi layer. And not many people could defeat her, but Lin Feng was still able to block all of her attacks. She had lost once again and was unable to put up resistance. He was a genius. He could use up to 7 strikes of the 8 strikes of desolation skill, and up to 14 using both hands. He had managed to master it with both hands to such a level. Such a thing was impossible. Was he really only at the first Ling Qi layer? How could his attacks be that horrifyingly powerful? When Lu Fei saw that Lin Feng was moving nearer and nearer with a weird smile on his face, she could feel a shiver run down her spine, and while remaining vigilant, she asked him, "What are you planning to do?" Lin Feng said nothing and just hummed as if he was thinking of what he would do. What kind of girl was she? She often used that delicate, charming and tender expression to fool others. She also looked very cute, but he knew that deep down she was violent. If Lin Feng didn't have a strong willpower and determination, he could have ended up falling for her too. Lin Feng, whose expression was barely discernible, looked at Lu Fei with an evil smile on his face and asked, "What do you think that I am going to do?" "You?" Lu Fei had the blood rush from her face and she looked incredibly pale. She took an arrow from her back and started pressing it against her own throat. She was extremely determined. Lin Feng was joking on purpose and at that moment was astonished. He wouldn't have thought that his joke would have such repercussions. He couldn't help but be completely shocked. "If I wanted to do anything to you, do you think I would have let you off last time?" Lin Feng had no choice but to speak. Could it be that he really looked and sounded like a pervert? Lin Feng's words suddenly relieved Lu Fei. She also put down the arrow that she was holding. "If you really want this place, then I will leave it to you. From this point forward we won't need to meet anymore. It's too troublesome with you. You continue to shock me," Lin Feng explained while walking towards Lu Fei. When he arrived next to her, he stopped. Lin Feng bent over and looked at Lu Fei. He slowly sighed, amazed by the beautiful skin of the girls in that world. Lin Feng, who was above Lu Fei, looked closely and attentively at her delicate face. He looked startled. Then he smiled and whispered, "I have only just realized now that you are pretty cute after all." When he finished talking, Lin Feng left. Lu Fei was astonished for a while, but she soon came to her senses. That bastard." Lin Feng sensed the stones of the mountains around him were shaking, and the sound of Lu Fei's voice was echoing through the atmosphere into his ears. There was no need to react that way. Holding a grudge against somebody like this wasn't a pleasant thing after all. It was even scary to a certain extent. "I guess this settles things between us." Lin Feng had a resplendent and brilliant smile on his face. He looked like a happy and well-rounded young man. Always taking things too seriously or always being too worried was pointless. Sometimes it felt good to relax and not worry. Lin Feng had left the mountains where he had just finally removed a thorn from his side. He saw some silhouettes on the horizon running at full speed, which created a dust storm behind them. Lin Feng had left the mountains where he had just finally removed a thorn from his side. He saw some silhouettes on the horizon running at full speed, which created a dust storm behind them. "Hey, what's going on?" asked a disciple who didn't understand what was going. "You still don't know? There are too many ferocious beasts in the Black Wind Mountain. It looks like oceans of ferocious beasts have emerged. A countless number of ferocious beasts have gone into a frenzy. All the Yunhai sect disciples are going there now to stop the disturbance." "A flood of ferocious beasts?" replied the other one, looking really excited. They immediately headed towards the crowd at great speed. While heading towards the Black Wind Mountain, the history of the Yunhai sect dated back 1,000 years, but the history of the Black Wind Mountain was even older than that. These floods of ferocious beasts weren't a rare thing, but for the great majority of them, they were weaker beasts. Many disciples were heading there for treasures and for battle experience. This was something which did not occur frequently and could not be missed. A few hundred years before, there was a flood of strong ferocious beasts. The Yunhai sect was almost destroyed by this flood. Ordinary ferocious beasts and Ling-level ferocious beasts were not a problem, they were ordinary and easy to kill. But during the apocalyptic flood from the past, there was a gigantic quantity of Xian-level ferocious beasts which were extremely strong compared to cultivators at the same level. They were incredibly hard to kill, which made them extremely dangerous. They made earthquakes with their movements and killed a multitude of people. The sect was almost completely destroyed. There were also rumors. At that time, the leader of the ferocious beasts was a mutant beast which could change its shape, a celestial ferocious beast. Because it had happened such a long time before, the information that people knew about it was limited. However, everybody knew that these floods of ferocious beasts were very dangerous, but that they were also a great opportunity. Cultivators would give their best efforts to obtain as many precious items as they could. Fighting against ferocious beasts would quickly increase the battle experience of the disciples. I wouldn't have thought that the Yunhai sect disciples would go there before the elite disciple exam, Lin Feng thought. He then started walking and decided to head straight to the Black Wind Mountain. Lin Feng didn't walk for a very long time. Lu Fei also came out of the mountains and was also heading to the Black Wind Mountain. On the highest mountain of the Yunhai sect were sitting a group of mysterious people looking down at the surroundings. They were watching Ling Huishan, the top-ranked core disciple of the Yunhai sect. How strong! It looks like this time the number of ferocious beasts is quite large. Ling Hu is extremely strong as expected. He looks like one of the 8 high officials of the country. People thought while looking at Ling Huishan's silhouette. They all knew that the high official, Chu Zhanpeng, had come to the Yunhai sect. They had seen how arrogant he was. It had moved Ling Huishan's heart a great deal, and he had now placed orders to control who came in and out of the Yunhai sect. The Black Wind Mountain looked like an apocalyptic battlefield. Sect elders and disciples were moving together towards to the Black Wind Mountain. The entrance of the Black Wind Mountain was surrounded by the strongest cultivators within the sect. The ferocious beasts were roaring loudly at the base of mountain. There were also many disciples killing ferocious beasts on the outskirts. It was a real bloodbath. At that moment, Elder Wuxia was standing on a huge monolith. His long sleeves were fluttering in the air. Elder Wuxia, these disciples are quite strong. It looks like the ordinary disciples are all capable of advancing really quickly within the sect, said an ordinary elder standing next to Wuxia. Haha. This is actually so easy for us to handle. There is no danger that we fear on this mountain. This is just a warm-up before the elite disciple exam. It's quite fun actually. Wuxia laughed when saying this. He sounded like there was absolutely no ferocious beast flood where disciples were fighting to the death. Elder Wuxia, Elder Wuxia. At that moment, more and more people were gathering. They all came to Wuxia and were bowing in front of him. They were extremely polite. At that moment, a silhouette passed by Wuxia at full speed towards a ferocious beast. Wuxia looked pale as if he had seen a ghost. There was a loud thunderous roar and suddenly a level 8 ferocious beast died on the spot. The thunderous roars came from Lin Feng's sword. They were making the entire atmosphere vibrate heavily. He threw himself at wild enraged rhinoceros and smashed its head. Then the beast collapsed and died. Lin Feng used his sword to remove the precious core and other valuable items while placing them in his bag. These precious items were extremely expensive and valuable for him. He would be able to exchange them within the sect for useful tools which would increase his strength and increase his cultivation. Wuxia, who was still standing still on the huge monolith, couldn't help but feel like he had a weight placed on his heart when he saw Lin Feng. That was precisely that disciple who had made him lose face in the presence of many other people. He had really humiliated him in front of everyone. He would have never thought that Lin Feng could improve his sword skills to such an extent in such a short amount of time. You have become quicker and stronger, but you, an ordinary disciple, dared to humiliate me. You should just die. Thought Wuxia full of hatred. He hadn't forgotten that day. The memory of those events were still fresh in his mind. Stop, shouted Wuxia while looking at Lin Feng. He sounded like a madman and his shout was filled with anger. He had shouted so loud that it surprised Lin Feng. He stopped what he was doing, turned around and saw Wuxia. Elder, what's wrong? Asked Lin Feng. Bastard, stop killing all the ferocious beasts. You're doing this only so that the others don't get the precious items, you selfish bastard. Good thing that I'm here to pay attention and think about your fellow disciples of the Yunhai sect. Wuxia was still shouting with anger. There was someone standing next to Lin Feng. He was an elder who followed Wuxia. He was sent there by Wuxia as he could easily kill Lin Feng with a flick of his wrist. Elder, I don't see what precious items you are talking about, said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. Last time, Wuxia had put Lin Feng in an almost fatal position. It was a death trap. He wanted to hand Lin Feng over to Chu Zhanpeng. Lin Feng wouldn't have thought that Wuxia would still hate him though. Lin Feng had never directly offended him. Wuxia had been wrong to try and frame Lin Feng. He thought this elder had already learned his lesson. Bastard, how dare you talk to an elder that way? Shouted the elder standing next to Lin Feng. He sounded furious. That elder wasn't weak and had relied on Wuxia to become an elder. Of course, he wasn't going to miss an opportunity to show in front of his benefactor. I'm saying that you stole the precious items. Do I need to repeat it once again? Said Wuxia smiling coldly. Lin Feng wasn't doing it on purpose. It was easy to misunderstand though. Wuxia was once again accusing Lin Feng of made-up crimes and then everybody would attempt to kill Lin Feng on the spot. If Lin Feng died, who would say anything? He was just an ordinary disciple. 2 elders were there as witnesses. 2 elders in charge of enforcing the rules within the sect. There would be nothing strange if they killed Lin Feng. Little boy, be very careful. Will you dare humiliate an elder? Said Wuxia. He was laughing on the inside. In his head, Lin Feng was already dead. You really are a shameless elder. Lin Feng cursed loudly. He had first accused Lin Feng of stealing items from the others, and then started adding other crimes to the list. Wuxia was in charge of enforcing the rules in the sect. How could he abuse his power like this? Even if some others didn't agree, they would protect Lin Feng if he was having issues with an elder. And Wuxia was trying to create a conflict between Lin Feng and the other elder. Lin Feng had no way to defend himself. If an elder said he had committed a crime, then he had committed a crime. Wuxia, I know you want to kill me. You don't need to invent false crimes to accuse me. Just admit it honestly like someone with a backbone. Lin Feng looked at Wuxia and smiled coldly. He sounded extremely self-confident and arrogant. Huh. Wuxia frowned. Lin Feng dared be that impertinent? Wuxia, I am just an ordinary disciple. You are an elder, what are you afraid of? If you want to kill me, then go ahead and try to kill me. I am right here waiting for you. Lin Feng saw that Wuxia was frowning and continued to talk. He didn't restrain himself at all. He didn't care about Wuxia and continued to humiliate him. No wonder Wuxia remembered that day. He had been extremely scared of the shadow which took hold of him when he attempted to attack Lin Feng. Indeed, that shadow had protected Lin Feng during those events. How could Wuxia be sure that the shadow wouldn't protect Lin Feng again? Was Lin Feng was not acting this way to make him attack so the shadow would act? He remembered that frightening shadow as it completely dominated his body. Wuxia couldn't help being terrified at the thought. He was clearly trembling in fear. He looked at Lin Feng with an evil look. Lin Feng looked back while remaining insolent and not scared at all. He Chong, let's go, help me capture him, said Emosia to Hichong, who was standing near Lin Feng. He didn't say kill, only capture. Alright, replied Hichong. Asshole, Lin Feng said while glancing at Hichong. The insult had spontaneously burst forth from his mouth. It was completely unexpected by the people watching from the sidelines. What did you say? Said Hichong, growing extremely furious. An ordinary disciple had suddenly dared insult him in front of the entire crowd. That was ridiculous, absurd, impossible. That was truly outrageous. Emosia doesn't dare to touch me and wants you to attack me. Haven't you thought of the consequences? Lin Feng was smiling coldly while looking at Hichong and then added, I'm not just insulting you though. The same also applies Emosia. He abuses his power as an elder. When you look at Emosia trembling in fear, are you sure that you still feel like attacking me? Emosia doesn't dare attack me. He wants you to do it. You're a scapegoat and you're even excited to obey his orders. Even if I say you are an asshole, am I wrong with what I say? Lin Feng's tone was cold but calm. It made Hichong furious. He didn't hesitate and immediately started moving towards Lin Feng. He secretly glanced at Emosia and saw Emosia was extremely furious as well, but as before, he was not moving towards Lin Feng at all. It was incredibly strange. Emosia is extremely strong and influential. Does he want me to act as a scapegoat? Hichong thought. He thought about the conversation Emosia and Lin Feng had had. The more he thought about it, the more he thought Lin Feng could be right. Besides, Emosia's father was standing behind them, so if something happened then Emosia would be helped by his father. However, if something happened to Hichong, who would protect him? At that moment, a large group of Yunhai sect disciples were surrounding them and had seen everything. They couldn't help but be stupefied. An ordinary disciple had only said a few words and had terrified 2 elders of the Yunhai sect. I tell you to hurry up and kill me, but you still don't dare. What sort of sect elders are you? Said Lin Feng, sneering at the. Then he turned around and beheaded a sly python with his sword. His sword was extremely sharp and precise. I tell you to hurry up and kill me, but you still don't dare. What sort of sect elders are you? Said Lin Feng, sneering at the. Then he turned around and beheaded a sly python with his sword. His sword was extremely sharp and precise. Lin Feng had an evil smile on his face, which made Hichong even more hesitant to attack. He surprisingly already believed Lin Feng's words and did not want to act rashly. Emosia didn't dare take risks either, so both elders were frozen in place, unmoving. The last time he made a move against Lin Feng, the evil shadow had defended him and had scared Emosia to death. Even just thinking about the shadow sent chills down his spine. It had been a deep psychological trauma for Emosia. The flood of ferocious beasts was getting more and more intense. There were also more and more disciples who were joining in the fights. Each of them looked crueler than the other, rushing into the multitude of ferocious beasts, which actually gave the impression they were bloodthirsty beasts themselves. Lu Fei had also arrived. She saw that Lin Feng was in the middle of all these ferocious beasts, and that it seemed easy for him to kill them. His sword was bathed in blood and rivers of blood flowed under his feet. Lin Feng wasn't using his full strength, so it was hard to tell he was at the Ling Qi layer. He was using the strength of the 9th Qi layer to kill the incoming ferocious beasts. However, every movement of his sword was precise, powerful, accurate, and quick. His swordsmanship was on a whole new level. Lin Feng had complete control when using his sword, and every movement was perfection. He was quick, accurate, and powerful. People were unable to tell how powerful Lin Feng was, but they knew he must be strong. This damned guy again. Lu Fei insulted Lin Feng in her thoughts. She took her bow and arrow from her back and immediately shot an arrow through the skull of a ferocious beast that Lin Feng was about to kill. Lin Feng turned around and saw Lu Fei's ice-cold eyes glaring at him. He smiled at her in a friendly way and ignored her killing the ferocious beast. He believed their debt had been settled already. Reawar. A furious roar spread throughout the atmosphere and echoed through the air. The ground started violently shaking. Everyone had the impression the ground was collapsing under their feet. Everyone's face suddenly became much more serious than before. An extremely powerful ferocious beast is coming. Many people started moving back, scared of the ferocious beast which was heading in their direction. A black fog was filling the air in a distant location and was gradually moving nearer. The crowd could just see the fog moving forward and trees getting split into pieces and blown away. How scary! The crowd was still retreating backwards. That kind of monstrous power must be at least at the Ling level of ferocious beasts. If an ordinary disciple went to try to kill it, then they would certainly die. When Lin Feng noticed that such a powerful ferocious beast was approaching, he started retreating as well. He wasn't confident that he could easily kill such a powerful ferocious beast. Until that moment, he had been killing only low-level ones and had never engaged in battle with a ferocious beast of the Ling level. While Lin Feng kept retreating backwards, a sudden oppressive force crashed onto his body. That oppressive force made his body go completely stiff and started to push him forwards and prevented him from moving back. Animal! Lin Feng shouted furiously, looking at Wuxia, who was behind him. He didn't need to ask himself who was doing this to him. It was obvious that only Elder Wuxia was able to do that, especially with such strength. He didn't dare attack him, so he just prevented him from retreating away from danger. Wuxia turned a deaf ear to Lin Feng's insults. He had an evil smile across his face. He had been humiliated by that worthless ordinary disciple a few times. He had completely lost face. But more and more he started to think that he was wrong about the shadow which was supporting Lin Feng. How was that possible that the possessor of that shadow spirit was always with Lin Feng? Besides, he had just looked around carefully and had seen no shadow at all. He had decided that if he was going to act, now would be the best chance. Of course, Wuxia wasn't absolutely convinced that the shadow wasn't in the area. Therefore, he had only tried to harm Lin Feng using sly and indirect methods. He would have the rampaging beast kill Lin Feng for him. The extremely powerful ferocious beast was moving nearer, and it seemed like there was an earthquake every time it moved. The crowd could only see a black fog filling the air. Around that black fog, there was a large group of extremely strong ferocious wild beasts. Each of them diffused such a strong qi that the disciples who saw had felt their hearts jumping from their chests. He's dead. Elder Wuxia willingly put him in such a situation. He's definitely screwed. Everybody was running back and saw that Lin Feng was alone, unable to move backwards in retreat. Wuxia was also standing away from the crowd and had firmly placed himself behind Lin Feng. The crowd had clearly understood what was going on. They couldn't help but insult Lin Feng for his foolishness. They didn't understand what the situation was actually about. This was the result for insulting an elder of the sect. That ferocious beast is extremely powerful. If you force me into fighting it, then I will most likely die in an instant, said Lin Feng, who was still oppressed, and shouted furiously. He wanted to go back, but Wuxia had blocked him. PFFF, it seems like this time the shadow spirit isn't with him. Wuxia thought cruelly. Then he said loudly, abandoning others before a large battle. This disciple is the shame of the Yun Hai sect. When Wuxia finished talking, an extremely thick vine suddenly burst out of his body, threw itself at Lin Feng at an incredible speed. Lin Feng's body was burning under the pressure of the force that was oppressing him, and in the blink of an eye, he was then constricted by thick vine plants which surrounding his body. It had moved extremely quick and looked like a boa. At that moment, Lin Feng was absolutely unable to move. Spirit. It's his spirit. Wuxia has a boa vine spirit. The crowd was shaking with roars of surprise. It looked like Wuxia was determined to make sure that Lin Feng would fall into that death trap and die. If an ordinary disciple actually dared confront an elder of the sect, he was doomed. However, there were some people who didn't really agree with such a thing. They thought it wasn't fair to attempt killing an ordinary disciple, especially when the one attempting to murder them was a powerful elder in the sect. They thought that it was quite shameless for Wuxia to act as he did, but nobody would dare to say anything. Who would dare to provoke Wuxia? Lin Feng held furiously. His sword was glowing, but it was constricted by the thick boa vine spirit like the rest of his body. There was nothing that he was able to move. Even though Lin Feng was a genius who was extraordinary and could definitely easily defeat cultivators of the same level or even of a much higher level than him, he was unable to defeat Wuxia, who was an elder of the Yun Hai sect. The gap between the two was gigantic. At that moment, Lin Feng was powerless. Impressive for an elder to bully a disciple. You're really shameless. At that moment, an ice-cold voice shouting was heard. Everybody in the crowd was surprised and stupefied. Surprisingly, the one who had said that was Lu Fei. the beautiful Lu Fei, who was desired by an incredibly huge amount of sect disciples. Huh. Wuxia frowned and looked at Lu Fei. He groaned, but he didn't dare attack Lu Fei either. He knew Lu Fei's status and background. The funny thing is that Wuxia's father, Tsonglan, had the same name as Lu Fei's father, Lu Tsonglan. But Lu Tsonglan was of course much more popular and famous than Tsonglan. Everybody knew the stories Lu Tsonglan in the Yunhai sect. Wuxia's father paled in comparison. The bow-wielding genius, Lu Tsonglan, and the patriarch of the sect, Nan Gongling, were extremely arrogant yet popular when they were young. They cared a lot about their fellow disciples in the sect. They were both the best cultivators within the sect. They were geniuses. Their friendship was also very deep and sincere. They were truly like brothers. Lu Fei released her spirit and grabbed her silver bow from her back. She prepared 3 arrows in addition of the 3 arrows of her spirit and aimed at the Boavine spirit. Lu Tsonglan was extremely strong. Lu Fei envied her father's strength and power. Even though she bitterly hated Lin Feng, she couldn't bear the sight that was happening in front of her. Wuxia was a very tiny personage, shameless and disgusting. Lu Fei didn't know if that attack was going to be of any use, but she still tried. As before, the Boavine spirit didn't move at all. Lin Feng looked amused for a second. He wouldn't have thought that Lu Fei would surprisingly be the one trying to help him in the last moments of his life. I have taken useless risks. I was too negligent. It's my fault, thought Lin Feng, depressed. He wouldn't have thought that he would come across Wuxia, and he had even less expected that Wuxia would do such an evil and shameless thing. Besides, at that moment, Wuxia was much stronger than him, so nobody was helping him. Lu Fei was an exception, but she wasn't strong enough. She tried to help, but in vain. Roar. The roar of the ferocious beast sounded violent and fierce. The beasts around it were also extremely quick, but there was still that gigantic black fog to be careful about. Nothing could resist it. The gigantic black fog was swallowing everything on its way through the forest. It was extremely strong, unimaginably powerful. It's so strong. It must be an imaginary demon. It's at least level 7. Wuxia could sense that terrifying power getting nearer and nearer. That monster was at the 7th Ling level, which meant that it had the strength of a cultivator of the 7th Ling Qi layer. That strength was coupled with its natural strength as a ferocious beast, which meant he was even more powerful than a cultivator of the 7th Ling Qi layer. Cultivators had to practice to acquire a basic strength, whereas beasts already had a natural-born strength which was added their level. Wuxia was observing Lin Feng and looking forward to seeing him die. "Wuxia, you bastard!" shouted an extremely loud voice which seemed to be thundering through the air. The person to whom the voice belonged was nowhere in sight. Wuxia's face immediately changed into a look of disbelief. His Boavine spirit suddenly released Lin Feng, and surprisingly went towards the group of ferocious beasts. "How dare you!" shouted an extremely loud voice which made the ground tremble. That extremely violent and furious shout terrified the entire crowd. They were all trying to guess to whom that voice belonged and who could be that powerful within the sect. "How dare you!" shouted an extremely loud voice which made the ground tremble. That extremely violent and furious shout terrified the entire crowd. They were all trying to guess to whom that voice belonged and who could be that powerful within the sect. There was a flying crane which appeared in the air above, then transformed into a bright light. Its light was so blinding that the light from the sun was completely blotted out. The light immediately began attacking the ferocious beasts. It seemed like these ferocious beasts could sense that the person who had arrived was insanely powerful. They all started neighing, roaring and emitting other noises, but that imaginary demon didn't seem to be affected as much. Lin Feng was about to get absorbed by that black fog, when the imaginary demon suddenly rolled away as if he was suddenly trying to escape. Ferocious beasts of the Ling level were not only able to absorb the qi of heaven and earth, but they were also very intelligent. They could feel and sense forces as well as powerful energies. It seemed like the imaginary demon had been affected by the force and energy emanating from the crane, which made it want to escape. The wings of the crane starting emitting a brilliant and dazzling silver light. It then immediately flew through the crowd of ferocious beasts, and suddenly, a river of blood seemed to be flowing down the mountain. These terrifyingly strong and powerful ferocious beasts, had surprisingly been defeated by the mysterious person. The possessor of Crane Spirit was extremely powerful. It was impossible to judge exactly how powerful he was. After all these ferocious wild beasts were destroyed, the black fog of that imaginary demon started dispersing through the atmosphere and turned into gray ashes. Lin Feng had vanished. Imaginary demon. As expected, its power is incredible. Some people in the crowd thought while looking at the imaginary demon. It was turning into a multitude of smaller imaginary demons. Didn't have a real body. Even if you were stronger than an imaginary demon, it was still very hard to catch. Suddenly, the wings of the crane started shaking very violently, which created a hurricane. Everybody in the crowd was falling down onto the ground from the pressure. Right after, the crane flew away and disappeared, leaving behind a massive amount of dead ferocious beasts lying down on the ground. How strong! Everybody was speechless. Chu Zhanpeng, who had come to the Yunhai sect not so long before, was also able to fly and had a legendary rock spirit. Even though he had similar skills and was also extremely strong, in comparison with this crane spirit, Chu Zhanpeng was a weakling. In a fight between the legendary rock and the crane, the legendary rock would not be able to withstand a single blow. A great majority of the people who were present had never seen such a strength before. They were very excited. They were wondering who that person was and how he was related to the sect. He was so strong that not a single ferocious beast could have given him a hard time. Our sect has existed for about 1,000 years. We are really the sect of the millennium. Even in periods of great prosperity, there are always hidden cultivators of amazing strength which have hidden amongst us. Everybody was extremely excited after watching such a display of power. They all hoped that one day they would have the chance to become that strong. At that moment, two people were moving through the sky. Even though their agility abilities were extremely developed, they were moving through the sky in a way which gave the impression it was an easy thing for everyone to do. These two people were surprisingly the Patriarch Nan Gongling followed by Emote Songlan. "What's going on?" asked Nan Gongling while falling from the sky onto the ground before landing in front of Wuxia. "Wuxia has been trying to kill one of our disciples. He pushed him towards the ferocious beasts so that he would get slaughtered by the monsters," said someone who was standing next to Lu Fei, whose eyes were filled with hatred. Lu Fei hated Lin Feng, but she hoped that she could become strong enough someday to regain her dignity and defeat Lin Feng. She didn't like to see Lin Feng treated in such an unjust way. Lin Feng was a real genius. He was even stronger than her, and no one could treat him that way. Lin Feng could become a pillar of the Yunhai sect. Lu Fei was sad to see an elder treat Lin Feng that way. "Patriarch, this is untrue. There is one ordinary disciple who was killing all the ferocious beasts and stealing all the precious items. Then when the stronger ones arrived, he deserted. Damn him," said Wuxia, who was, obviously, not going to admit what he had done. Lin Feng was already dead anyway. Even if he didn't admit that he had killed Lin Feng, who would say anything? "Alright, today you clearly wish to die today." An extremely loud and aggressive voice emerged. A hurricane was rolling through the air, blowing almost everyone away, and no one was able to stand steadily on their feet. Wuxia's face changed drastically. A terrifyingly powerful chi appeared and was surrounded by a radiant light. It then flew through the air and crashed into Wuxia's body. Boom! 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 The rock on which Wuxia currently standing exploded into 1,000 pieces, and Wuxia's mouth spurted blood like a fountain. That single attack was extremely powerful. The elder Wuxia had been defeated in a single strike. He was bleeding endlessly, and all of this was done in the presence of his father, Emote Songlan. The crowd had the impression they were watching a dream. They couldn't believe that it was really happening before their eyes. Then the crowd looked again to see who had done that attack and saw an old man. Everybody recognized him. "Huh! That's the old man who is the entrance guard of the Xingqian Pavilion." Everybody was stunned. As a disciple of the Yunhai sect, everybody had already been to the Xingqian Pavilion. It had to be the old man. Who couldn't recognize Protector Bei? They were not used to seeing him like this though. They were used to seeing him looking almost asleep or lazy at the entrance of the Xingqian Pavilion. They would have never imagined that he could be so monstrously strong. At that moment, Protector Bei's eyes were filled with murderous intentions, and he was moving slowly towards Wuxia. He then said in an ice-cold tone, You're an elder of the Yunhai sect in charge of enforcing the sect rules, and yet you dare to kill a young disciple, a junior of the sect? If I don't kill you, it means that the sect holds no place in my heart. Emosia's face was deathly pale. He wouldn't have thought that suddenly someone would kill him just because of a simple disciple. A silhouette appeared before Emosia and seemed to be vigilant. It was precisely Emote Songlan. Protector Bay. Don't you think that you are exaggerating a little bit? Exaggerating? Emote Songlan, have you not educated your son? Said Protector Bay extremely sharply, which made Emote Songlan completely lose face. He then shouted, "Get the hell away!" Protector Bay, do you have to be this furious? Asked Nan Gongling, who came in front of Protector Bay at the same time. Nan Gongling of course knew what kind of person Emosia was, but when it came to the sect, he was still an important person. Besides, there was still Emote Songlan. He was extremely strong and in charge of the elders. Therefore, attacking Emosia would cause trouble amongst those standing at the top within the sect. Patriarch, let me handle this business. I am about clean up the sect today, said Protector Bay, ignoring everything which had been said until that moment. He regarded Lin Feng as the bright future of the sect. He thought Lin Feng was a gift bestowed upon his sect by the gods, and Emosia had fed him to the ferocious beasts. Protector Bay! Shouted Nan Gongling extremely loud, attempting to make Protector Bay regain his calm. Don't kill Emosia, think about the sect above all, said Nan Gongling to Protector Bay. Think about the sect above all? Said Protector Bay with a sort of smile on his face. He thought that killing Emosia was particularly important for the sake of the sect. Nangong, do you know who that young man was? Protector wasn't shouting anymore. His voice was low and sounded it was filled with emotions. Nan Gongling was stupefied. He had no idea there were so many young disciples in the sect. If Protector Kong was here today, Emosia would be dead already, said Protector Bay. That sentence was filled with meaning. His eyes were filled with pain and sorrow. He then said, think about the sect first. Nangong, in your life as patriarch, we will never be blessed with a talent like that again. When he finished talking, Protector Bay transformed into a crane again, and suddenly vanished, leaving a hurricane behind him. Protector Kong. Nan Gongling couldn't believe he had heard the old man pronounce that name. He was shaking from head to toe. Nan Gongling obviously remembered and understood everything. That shadow which had protected Lin Feng last time was precisely Protector Kong's spirit. He had protected Lin Feng. He then remembered the 8 sounds of drums from the precipice of Zhanggu, which had filled the entire atmosphere of the Yunhai sect. Boom! Nan Gongling's heart started pounding. His thoughts were flowing at full speed. He was getting more and more furious. He was starting to find himself being overwhelmed with murderous thoughts. Emosia. Emote Songlan could feel that the patriarch wanted to kill his son, and that he was growing furious. What had happened? What had Protector Bay told Nan Gongling? Emote Songlan glanced at Emosia. That bastard of a son's behavior was really worse and worse. He was insolent and acted selfishly and relentlessly without thinking. Lin Feng had been wrapped up in that black fog, and immediately after he had gone through a mystical event. It had seemed like his body had been transported through the universe. He didn't know where he had landed. An extremely cold chi started to oppress his body, and to dig into his flesh and bones. He wanted to struggle, but he didn't know what or how to fight against this chi. He realized he was extremely weak in comparison. When confronted with death, Lin Feng released his twin spirits. His eyes became pitch black, and he became aware of all the universe that was surrounding him. However, as before, he was immersed in a world of darkness. Celestial spirit, Lin Feng said in a low voice. A brilliant and resplendent light appeared. It was dazzling and mystical. Lin Feng suddenly saw 2 piercing cold eyes of a ferocious beast which was staring at him as if he was a prey. What's that? Is that a real ferocious beast? Lin Feng saw cruel eyes and a hideous face. It looked truly horrible. Many tentacles were approaching him, as if they wanted to wrap themselves around him. At the same time, a tentacle had touched his spirit. His strange small snake spirit as well as his celestial spirit were being swallowed. Lin Feng was feeling so weak that he even thought that some of his vitality was slowly being consumed as well. At that moment, something very strange happened to Lin Feng. Something that had never happened before happened. His small snake spirit had moved for the first time. The snake was starting to move. The small snake was moving. It slowly started to open its mouth and the black fog suddenly started to pour into its mouth. The small snake was moving. It slowly started to open its mouth and the black fog suddenly started to pour into its mouth. Swallowing the black fog, Lin Feng could obviously feel and sense that his spirit had changed and was still changing. That small snake was becoming full of black fog. His snake spirit continued to swallow the black fog. The more it ate black fog, the bigger it grew. It was gradually growing larger and larger. Tentacles started to move towards the snake, but it didn't have any effect on the snake spirit. Strangely, the snake was swallowing them as well. Lin Feng was astonished. His snake spirit was consuming everything. Lin Feng had been utterly helpless when facing the ferocious beast of the Ling layer, and thought he was about to die. He would have never thought that his small unawakened spirit, which was the reason for his nickname as Trash, would start moving so suddenly. There was something strange about the ferocious dark eyes, as if there was something wrong. There was a small twinkle which appeared in the eyes, which were half filled with worry. Then a formation of dark tentacles and the black fog started to move away, but the snake threw itself towards them. Roar! Lin Feng was utterly stupefied. His snake spirit looked excited. It opened its huge and ferocious mouth. Inside, there were a multitude of tentacles and black fog in the process of being swallowed. It was not enough for his snake spirit. The previously little snake was growing bigger and bigger. From an initial size of 1/3 of a meter, it had grown to a meter in length. It seemed like it was a gluttonous snake trying to consume the world. The imaginary demon groaned and roared as it was fighting against the snake, but its body was still being gradually eaten by the snake spirit. The imaginary demon released Lin Feng and the black fog slowly disappeared. Roar! The snake made the same sound as the imaginary demon had made. It then swallowed as much black fog as it could and went back to Lin Feng's side. The snake spirit had become small again but was still much bigger than before. Then it rolled itself around Lin Feng's shoulder and fell asleep. It swallowed the imaginary demon? Lin Feng's eyes were wide open with shock. The black fog of the imaginary demon had completely disappeared without trace. That was the trash spirit? Lin Feng was speechless. At that moment he had the sensation an immense strength was invading his body, and a loud buzzing noise was resonating in his brain. He felt his vision grow blurry and he collapsed, completely losing consciousness. Lin Feng didn't know how much time had passed when he regained consciousness. When he opened his eyes, he was in a cave. It looked like that of a ferocious beast. Boom! Suddenly Lin Feng's body seemed like it was being crushed, which terrified him. Panic filled his face and he felt pain that was indescribable. His heart was pounding. His dark spirit appeared along with his celestial spirit and suddenly, his mind began to become clear and undisturbed. His celestial spirit was also floating before his eyes in the form of a book. Immediately after, the small snake spirit also appeared. It was about 1 meter in length. Its body was becoming more solid and rigid. As before, it was still small and looked like it was asleep curled around Lin Feng's shoulder. It looked like it had a lot of affection for Lin Feng. From a glance they seemed to be very close and looked to have a deep connection. He had awakened his snake spirit. Something extraordinary happened which made Lin Feng tremble from head to toe. On his back a face had appeared. It had 2 ice-cold, pitch-black eyes. Imaginary demon. Lin Feng was still shaking and still trying to understand what had happened. How was this possible? At the moment when he had been swallowed by the imaginary demon, his snake spirit had suddenly appeared. A third spirit? Multiple spirits? He was a real genius. He was truly gifted from the gods. On the continent there was almost nobody who experienced such a thing. Out of 1 million of people, there was maybe 1 who happened to have 2 spirits. Surprisingly, Lin Feng even had 3. Was he a supernatural existence? A god? 3 spirits. He would be able to terrify everyone at the mere mention of it. He would scare his enemies to death. There was an unceasing milky white light circulating in and out of his body. It seemed to be the powerful chi from heaven and earth. It was encircling him and circulating through his body. Did I just break through to the second Ling Chi layer? Lin Feng's brain was somehow short-circuited with the shock of all these events. Even if he had released his spirit and was still able to remain calm to a certain extent, it was hard not to get excited considering the circumstances and the terrifying power of the things happening within his body. Lin Feng was using all of his mental focus to try and understand all the things that had occurred. It looks like that small snake is able to swallow ferocious beasts, and enables me to use them and their power. It also seems like it is able to absorb them into itself and use them to increase my strength. Lin Feng was just conjecturing what was happening, but a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Trash spirit? People laughed at him because they thought his spirit was useless, but it was actually extremely powerful. If all those people who constantly laughed at him, bullied him and called him a piece of trash because of spirit, knew that he had such a powerful ability granted from his snake spirit, how would they react? Damn, I only narrowly climbed from my own grave. I have escaped from the pit, and this will be the end of all the hardships I have suffered until now. Lin Feng recalled his spirits back into his body. He looked up to the sky and uttered a long cry. He didn't know where he was at that moment though. He could only analyze the situation considering all of his past experiences and knowledge. Celestial fangs. These fangs can devour anything. That's a good name. Lin Feng whispered. That's the best name Lin Feng could think of to refer to his spirit, to that small snake. Celestial fangs. Wuxia. If I don't kill you, I swear, I will make your life not worth living, or my name is not Lin Feng. Lin Feng stood up and his eyes filled with incredible killing intent. Lin Feng took a deep breath, and as he did, the air in his throat tasted filthy. It tasted like a ferocious beast. Lin Feng looked carefully around him, and it seemed like he was in the cave of a ferocious beast, which made him feel extremely uncomfortable and nervous. Lin Feng quickly moved outside of the cave. Outside was a huge forest. Its trees were crushed into pieces. It seemed like its trees had been crushed by ferocious beasts that had trampled through the area. The smell of ferocious beasts still filled the air. He could even sense the ground shake under his feet at times. He could hear them roar and neigh in the distance. It seems like the flood of ferocious beasts hasn't stopped. Lin Feng had just encountered a large group of ferocious beasts where the imaginary demon was, but he knew that there were still other groups filled with extremely powerful ferocious beasts. The Black Wind Mountain was full of extremely strong ferocious beasts. He released his dark spirit. His eyes became pitch black. His sense of hearing and his vision became extremely well developed. He could see and sense everything in his surroundings. His brain was also processing all the data it received very quickly. It was as if he could sense and understand the whole area around him, as if he was looking down on a strategy map. At the same time, the strong qi of ferocious beasts was revolving around Lin Feng's feet on the ground. It had started enveloping Lin Feng's body until it completely covered it. Lin Feng entered into a transcendent state of mind. Wrapped inside that qi, it became impossible to see Lin Feng from the outside. It was the imaginary demon which had given Lin Feng its power. That imaginary demon was extremely powerful, and its impression was enhanced. This was why it was impossible to see the imaginary demon's real body. It was just a gigantic black fog as far as anyone could see. Lin Feng, thanks to his spirit consuming the imaginary demon, now had that ability too. The imaginary demon's skill was imprinted onto Lin Feng's mind, and could be used naturally. In the Black Wind Mountain, there was an incredible amount of ferocious beasts. They were not only in one place but were everywhere in the territory. Because some ferocious beasts were extremely strong, Lin Feng had to be very careful. He could use his qi to pretend he was a ferocious beast himself thanks to his new ability. These ferocious beasts were running madly everywhere in the Black Wind Mountain. As the number of ferocious beasts had greatly increased, they were running towards the outskirts as if trying to conquer new territory. At that moment, the qi which surrounding Lin Feng really seemed to be that of a ferocious beast. Lin Feng started to walk. Some small and weak ferocious beasts passed by Lin Feng. Surprisingly, all these small ferocious beasts emitted small and cute sounds indicating that they were submitting themselves to him. The world of the ferocious beasts was even rougher than that of cultivators. It was ruled by the law of the jungle. The weak would become the food for the strong. Even some Ling-level ferocious beasts were running away when they sensed Lin Feng's presence. Adult ferocious beasts of the Ling level were at least level 5, which was quite terrifying. However, ordinary ferocious beasts of the Ling level could not compare themselves to the imaginary demon. The depths of the Black Wind Mountain are really frightening. Lin Feng realized how terrifying the depths of the Black Wind Mountain were, and he couldn't help but think about before, when he was still at the Qi layer and dared come here without being scared at all. How ignorant was he? If they had met any of the ferocious beasts of the Ling level, they probably would have died. Of course, in the eyes of a ferocious beast of the Ling level, a cultivator of the Qi layer was like an ant. Maybe these ferocious beasts wouldn't even have looked at them, just like Lin Feng looks at ordinary low-level ferocious beasts. This is a great opportunity. Why am I not hunting and killing ferocious beasts to gather precious items? Lin Feng started being both nervous and excited. Ling-level ferocious beasts were not like ordinary ones. They could absorb the qi of the earth, and the precious items he could get from them were extremely valuable. If he gave these items to the elders within the sect to trade, they could produce profound pills or weapons for the Ling Qi layer. Besides, some of the energies these ferocious beasts absorbed were also extremely useful in increasing a person's cultivation. Good profound healing pills could cure injuries, including broken bones. It was even said that some pills could resurrect the dead. Good weapons could help greatly enhance one's attack and defense skills in battle. All of these items could be acquired and bought in exchange for precious items recovered from these ferocious beasts. This is why so many people took the risks to travel here and kill ferocious beasts. They wanted to acquire precious items to trade. Lin Feng had the feeling that he was far too poor. Apart from the soft sword, which was given to him by Protector Bei, and the profound healing pills which Protector Kong had given to him, he actually had nothing of value. He had indeed never taken the time to consider his wealth and equipment. Chapter 64. Deadly Sword. Some people have a high status in society and do not have to worry for money. It's also possible to use some profound pills to increase one's strength and move up in the hierarchy. I could use profound pills and trade for better weapons to increase my strength. As far as I am concerned, I do not have an influential background and I can only rely on my own strength, thought Lin Feng. His future on the path of cultivation was too important to him. There were many commitments he had in this life. If Lin Feng wanted to succeed, he had to put in more effort than anyone else. Effort was not all he needed though, some luck was also necessary. He also needed people supporting him if he wanted to advance quickly. It seemed like life was going to be full of hardships. In life there would be a great deal of injustice. Not everyone and everything could be partial and fair. However, to someone who put in more work than anyone else, it would eventually show its rewards and eventually make life easier. If your natural abilities were too low, hard work coupled with perseverance and willpower could be enough to lead a luxurious and comfortable life. However, not only were Lin Feng's natural abilities not low, he was an incredible genius with latent potential hidden within his body. Since this was the case, how could he not acquire great power and wealth to one day live a comfortable life? While thinking of all these things, Lin Feng started moving. Not so long after, he encountered an abominable rhinoceros eating a small ferocious beast. There was blood everywhere on the ground and the whole scene was painted red with blood. It was a gruesome scene. The ferocious beast qi which was surrounding his body vanished and Lin Feng started walking slowly and carefully towards the scene. As if it was aware that something was approaching him, the abominable rhinoceros turned around. Its bloodthirsty eyes were staring at Lin Feng. It looked brutal, ferocious and bloodthirsty. Its pupils were huge and dark as its gaze pierced through Lin Feng. There was surprisingly someone in the world who was foolish and dared to step within its territory. The abominable rhinoceros was naturally strong, cruel and bloodthirsty. Once it had reached adulthood, it was a first-class Ling-level ferocious beast. It could reach a length of 2 meters and a height of 1 meter. It was a giant but sturdy ferocious beast. That abominable rhinoceros looked like it had just reached adulthood. It was thus a first-rank Ling-level ferocious beast. The abominable rhinoceros is quick. Its horn is extremely sharp, but its strength lies in its natural defense abilities. An ordinary cultivator who is at the first Ling Qi layer could never defeat it. Lin Feng was trying to remember all the characteristics of an abominable rhinoceros. It was impossible to easily break through its defense. Only with enough speed and a precise strike could a cultivator hope to defeat this ferocious beast. Otherwise, fighting it would lead to their death. At that moment, the abominable rhinoceros was stamping its foot on the ground. A hole appeared under its feet. It was getting ready to charge forward at any moment. Lin Feng was still incredibly relaxed as he watched the situation. A strong sword chi was released from his body and had begun to fill the atmosphere. Before the ferocious beast could even start its charge, Lin Feng had already thrown himself towards it. Following each of Lin Feng's steps, the sword chi which he was releasing increased and became stronger. A few steps later, the air was filled with a whistling sound. The hair which was covering the body of the abominable rhinoceros stood completely on end, and suddenly it roared loudly and retreated. Ling-level ferocious wild beasts were very intelligent and had advanced instincts. It sensed the incredibly powerful sword force which was hidden and knew that the human in front of him would be extremely dangerous to fight. Moonlight feather agility. Lin Feng couldn't let it escape. He dashed through the air at full speed and his sword was glowing with a radiant light. One strike, one life. The sword force completely filled the atmosphere. A white light was being emitted from the tip of the sword. The running abominable rhinoceros had a cut which had appeared on its body, but it continued to run forwards. Blood was rushing out of its body and left a long thick trail of blood behind it as it ran. It was badly injured and was losing large amounts of blood. Some poisonous chi started flowing out from the body of the rhinoceros. Lin Feng thrust his sword into the chi and in an instant the chi had vanished. The abominable rhinoceros was dead. Ferocious beasts were extremely sensitive to blood. In the Black Wind Mountain, there were too many extremely strong ferocious beasts. Therefore, Lin Feng would need to quickly kill the abominable rhinoceros and would then leave. Otherwise the blood would attract too many ferocious beasts who would be attracted by the blood. Lin Feng was extremely satisfied with his sword skills and the power unleashed with each strike. Even though the abominable rhinoceros was extremely strong and its body was tough, its body had suffered lethal injuries from a single strike with Lin Feng's sword. As Lin Feng continued to move through the mountain, Lin Feng killed another Ling-level ferocious wild beast, but this time it wasn't the abominable rhinoceros but an earth-shaking bear. As before, Lin Feng killed it in one strike. 2 days later, on the outskirts of the Black Wind Mountain, a young man had appeared and all of his clothes were torn and dirty. He was filthy from head to toe. He was carrying a sword in his hand and in front of him, there was a gigantic snake. That snake was about 20 meters long. Its extremely thick body was slithering on the ground towards the young man. Its head was 5 meters up in the air. It looked hideous and ferocious. It looked like it was ready to strike at any moment. Its gigantic eyes were green and were filled with murderous light. Poison and blood was endlessly spraying from its mouth. A second-level Ling ferocious wild beast is incredibly hard to deal with as expected. Lin Feng's robes had a large hole through which one could see his skin where he had been struck. He was bruised and the area had turned dark purple. Lin Feng was worn out from this fight. Lin Feng had been injured by fighting with that python of darkness. During these 2 days, Lin Feng had killed around 100 ferocious beasts, all at the Ling level. He had killed a few second-level Ling ferocious beasts as well, but it was the first time that he came across such a strong and dangerous ferocious beast. SSSSSSS. SSSSSSS. Its huge tongue was flickering through the air while it continues to hiss. The snake was spitting out poison and Lin Feng would have to constantly avoid the poison from the snake. But at that moment, the huge python of darkness fell down and its head crashed into the ground. This was because its tail had been damaged and pinned by a tree which had fallen down onto it. The snake couldn't avoid it. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind had filled the air. If Lin Feng didn't have good agility techniques, he would have already been killed. The second-level Ling python of darkness was incredibly strong and powerful. Suddenly, the space in front of Lin Feng filled with light and slashed down onto the python before vanishing from sight again. The snake emitted an extremely loud moan. Lin Feng had felt like he was being oppressed by the power of the snake. The python of darkness kept moving towards him. Boom! 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 The trees were cracking as the python was crushing everything on its path. Lin Feng was like a shadow in the sun and was too fast for the snake to catch him. If there was an observer, he would think that the snake had gone mad and was chasing an illusion. Even though the python of darkness was only the second level of the Ling level, Even an extremely strong cultivator of the third Ling Qi layer would find it difficult to escape with his life. They knew it would be extremely difficult to kill the snake, and would never directly confront it. However, Lin Feng had just reached the second Ling Qi layer 2 days before, and was not aware of how dangerous the python was. "Deadly sword," shouted Lin Feng. At that moment, his extremely strong and powerful sword thrust towards the python of darkness, which cut through its body, leaving it severely bleeding. But this time it seemed like the snake hadn't felt the strike connect with its body. It wanted Lin Feng's life and had gone into a complete frenzy. "I'm not playing with you anymore." Lin Feng had almost gotten killed by the python of darkness multiple times already. After 2 days continuously fighting within this mountain, his sword skills had already become much stronger than before. He had even more confidence in his own ability. He was convinced that he would be able to defeat almost any cultivator in the second Ling Qi layer. After all, how many cultivators of the second Ling Qi layer were stronger than the python of darkness? Lin Feng released the first layer of his celestial spirit. His eyes became pitch black and he was surrounded by a world of darkness. Nothing could escape from his vision. He could see and feel everything. Even if the snake was extremely quick, its attack seemed slow to the Lin Feng that now stood before it. The snake was about to attack from the side. Lin Feng was firmly holding his soft sword, which emitted an ice-cold light. A deadly sword qi emanated from Lin Feng's body. It looked like it could destroy anything it touched. Lin Feng raised his head. He calmly looked at the python of darkness that was moving towards him. Lin Feng's eyes looked like that of a brutal demon. At that moment, he was extremely heartless and there was not an ounce of mercy left inside him. "Deadly sword." Lin Feng had faintly said those words. His mouth had barely moved. He wielded his long sword, which was releasing a strong qi as well as a strange gray qi. It was a deadly qi. The extremely powerful gray qi moved very quickly and was accompanied by a long and painful screech. That strike had cut the snake cleanly into 2 halves. A cloud of dust rose into the air and the snake hit the ground. The body of the python of darkness was still writhing on the ground, as if it did not believe it was dead. Lin Feng used his long sword to pierce through the python's skull, and with that action it had completely stopped moving. The atmosphere had become calm once more. Lin Feng had managed to kill the python of darkness, a second-level Ling ferocious beast. Deadly sword. Lin Feng's sword could truly be called deadly after being bathed in blood these 2 days in the Black Wind Mountain. Lin Feng stepped forward and picked up the precious items from the body of the python of darkness, then left towards the sect. 2 days and the flood of ferocious beasts had already strongly decreased to the point that it wasn't a flood anymore. It also seemed that the elite disciple exam was about to start in the upcoming days. The sudden ferocious beast flood had disappeared as fast as it had come. At the edge of the Black Wind Mountain there were only a few Qi-layer ferocious beasts and a great quantity of dead ferocious beasts. The sudden ferocious beast flood had disappeared as fast as it had come. At the edge of the Black Wind Mountain there were only a few Qi-layer ferocious beasts and a great quantity of dead ferocious beasts. Of course, there weren't only carcasses of ferocious beasts. There were also human corpses, which showed that some disciples had lost their lives while fighting against the flood of ferocious beasts. Streams of blood were flowing endlessly on the ground, making a river of blood which was flowing down the mountain. It showed how terrible and fierce the flood of ferocious beasts had been to have caused such a scene. It had been mostly weaker ferocious beasts in that flood. If there had been a flood of stronger ferocious beasts, what would have happened to the sect? At the base of the mountain there was still a great deal of Yunhai sect disciples. The majority of these disciples were ordinary disciples who were fighting against Qi-layer ferocious beasts. They were using the battle to develop their skills while also gathering precious items. Haha, there is a ferocious beast of the Ling level. Try to prevent it from leaving and then I will kill it. At that moment, a clear and bright voice spread throughout the atmosphere, followed by an extremely loud laughter. Some people saw that there were 2 Yunhai ordinary disciples were fighting together against a ferocious beast of the Ling level. Actually, they had an abominable rhinoceros in front of them. Between them and the abominable rhinoceros, there were carcasses of ferocious beasts. The 2 ordinary disciples seemed to be ignoring them. They were focused completely on the opponent in front of them, and were filled with greed from the precious items they could receive from its body. The abominable rhinoceros is extremely strong, and its strongest point is its defense. Do you think you can kill it? Said a thin young man. His name was Pajun. He was staring at the abominable rhinoceros whose eyes looked bloodthirsty and violent. Don't worry, Pajun, don't you believe in my abilities? The thin young man named Pajun simply grinned at the other disciple. The other disciple seemed really confident in his abilities. The only person I trust is myself, said Pajun. But at the same time, he grabbed 2 rattans that he was carrying and threw them at the abominable rhinoceros to bind it in place. Arrgh! The abominable rhinoceros was enraged and tried to move around, but it seemed to be unable to move freely. It was growing more and more furious over time. Pajun was being whipped back and forth by the beast, but he still had a calm composure. He was holding the rattans steadily, trying to use them to bind the abominable rhinoceros. He was managing to lock the abominable rhinoceros in place. Attack now! Yelled Pajun. There was no need to shout this as his friend was already there attacking the abominable rhinoceros within the blink of an eye. The abominable rhinoceros was stamping on the ground heavily, which made a cloud of dust rise into the air. It was going into a frenzy. Pajun's friend carried out an extremely strong attack on the rhinoceros using both his palms. The abominable rhinoceros roared extremely loudly. One strike had been enough for the beast to meet a brutal and instant death. Pajun, how was that? Was it a mistake to cooperate with me? Asked the strong young man while smiling. At that moment, Pajun had already stepped forward and started removing all of the precious items from the corpse. When you've broken through to the Ling Qi layer, it's really a different level. Your spirit gives enough strength to deal with some opponents. Thought Lin Feng, who saw that Pajun had used rattans. Obviously that was his spirit. It was similar to Emosia's spirit. Of course, Emosia's strength and Pajun's strength were not on the same level though. I would have never thought that this guy's strength had improved so much. Lin Feng was smiling. He then moved forwards to the 2 young people who were picking up their precious items. Who? At that moment, Pajun quickly turned around. An extremely strong qi quickly burst out of his body, and his 2 rattans started moving towards Lin Feng. Huh. Lin Feng was surprised. He hadn't thought that Pajun's defense perimeter was so wide, and that he'd attack so quickly upon sensing someone moving closer to them. Lin Feng stepped aside really quickly and a strong sword qi emerged from his body, directly crashing down onto Pajun, making him almost suffocate from the intense pressure. Pajun, stop it, he's my friend. The strong young disciple said quickly as he had turned around and saw the scene in front of him. At that moment, Pajun recalled the rattans back and the qi which was suffocating him had vanished as well. He remained vigilant and kept watching Lin Feng very closely. That guy, he is incredibly strong. Haha, Lin Feng, you're finally showing yourself. I came to look for you more than a dozen times and I couldn't find you anywhere. I thought you had left the Yunhai sect forever. It turned out that that strong young disciple was Lin Feng's friend. Han man, I just came back a little while ago, said Lin Feng while smiling before adding. Han man, you're now able to kill a ferocious beast of the Ling level. You have progressed so fast. When Lin Feng had left for Yangzhou City, at that time Han Man was only at the 8th Qi layer. In that short amount of time, Han Man had surprisingly broken through to the Ling Qi layer. Lin Feng was astonished. He was, of course, also extremely happy for Han Man. He did not have many friends, but he would definitely count Han Man as one of them. Haha, I've broken through to the Ling Qi layer, but I was just lucky this time, Han Man said while scratching his head, and then continued. Oh, anyway, how about you, Lin Feng? You used to be much stronger than me. How strong have you become now? I'm just an average disciple, said Lin Feng with a big teasing smile on his face. Lin Feng was looking at Han Man's friend, Pajun. That guy had an ice-cold expression on his face. He looked like he was ready to strike Lin Feng if he made the wrong move. If that was the case, it could make things complicated and unpredictable for Han Man. Oh, by the way, I forgot to introduce the 2 of you. Lin Feng, this is Pajun. He's extremely strong, but he's discreet and very reserved, unlike the ordinary disciples who consider themselves the best because of some ranking. He is also much stronger than them, Han Man said as he was smiling while introducing them to each other. Pajun, this is Lin Feng. He is like a brother to me. I hope you can become good friends with him as well. I'm first taking the precious items we have just obtained, said Pajun while looking cold and indifferently. Then he turned around and continued what he was doing. He took out a dagger and split the beast open to harvest the materials which could be traded into the sect. Lin Feng, don't worry, Pajun just has that kind of personality. He's a very cold person, but he is a good guy. Lin Feng ignored it and kept smiling. Pajun and Lin Feng were not friends, so it didn't matter if Pajun did not interact with him. There was no need to get offended by a stranger's behavior. Han man, everybody has started to leave. How come you are still out here fighting? Many of them have left because of the elite disciple exam. As we were already here, we thought we should get some more precious items to trade with the sect. We are the only 2 remaining Ling Qi layer in the surrounding area, so there should not be a problem. All that remains are Qi layer disciples. Are you not getting ready for the elite disciple exam? Lin Feng was stupefied and couldn't help but ask. Of course I'll join. I'm not late yet. I still have some time to collect more riches. Hehe. Han man was the same guy as before, always smiling and positive. Lin Feng sometimes had the impression he was talking to a simple-minded person. But at least these kinds of people were honest and true to themselves. They were not the kind of people to have evil intentions in their hearts, and they are easy to get along with. Pajun, it's all right. There is nothing of value in the area, and I doubt we have missed something. Han man said while looking at Pajun. All right, let's leave. Pajun said while nodding. He picked up the bag full of precious items and stood up. Lin Feng, you should leave too. Let's go back together, said Han man to Lin Feng, and then asked, Lin Feng, come on, tell me, how strong are you now? Lin Feng thought for a while and then shook his head. He was actually unable to clearly identify his own strength. Maybe he had to fight against someone of the 3rd Ling Qi layer to correctly judge his current level of strength. Oh, you really enjoy being mysterious and keep so many things secret from me. Can you cope with an abominable rhinoceros or not? Asked Han man, whose curiosity had become unbearable. He needed to know. Cope with an abominable rhinoceros alone? Thought Pajun when he heard Han man ask that question. Lin Feng's strength was certainly of the Ling Qi layer. A moment ago, the qi from Lin Feng's sword had almost made him suffocate and created immense pressure on his body. Pajun would have probably been defeated by Lin Feng in an instant if they had fought, and Pajun was sure that he would not even be using his full strength. Pajun could not measure how strong this young man was. Even though the abominable rhinoceros had extremely high defense abilities, Lin Feng had had no problem killing one using his sword. I should be able to handle it, said Lin Feng while touching his nose. Dealing with an abominable rhinoceros? He had required only 1 hit to deal a lethal blow on one previously, but even then it did not require him to use his full strength. Hehe, you obviously have broken through to the Ling Qi layer. This time we 3 will probably pass the elite disciple exam and all become elite disciples. After that, we will be able to work hard and become pillars of the Yunhai sect, said Han man joyfully with a big smile on his face. 3 disciples of the Ling Qi layer. They would probably be able to accomplish great things if they work together. Work hard for the sect? Whose decision is that? Asked Pajun tactlessly. He thought that Han man was really naive. We should let Lin Feng decide. He's a real genius and he has a much greater potential than me. Even though he may be weaker than me now, he will probably surpass my power later. He's always been there to protect the weak. He saved my life. Whatever he says, I will always listen to him, said Han man, sounding extremely simple-minded. What about me? Asked Pajun. You and I are very strong, but since I listen to Lin Feng, you should obviously listen to Lin Feng as well, said Han man, which sounded extremely simple and completely illogical. Lin Feng was speechless and was looking at him while stupefied. That guy was so naive and his thoughts were so simple. Pajun would never be convinced by such naive statements. Who would? In the stormy gorge, a huge crowd had gathered which almost seemed endless. The crowd had gathered in front of the life and death arena. They were all young disciples of the Yunhai sect who were excitedly talking amongst themselves. There was such a larger number of disciples that they were all standing shoulder to shoulder. Looking down from above, it looked like thousands upon thousands of ants. In the stormy gorge, a huge crowd had gathered which almost seemed endless. The crowd had gathered in front of the life and death arena. They were all young disciples of the Yunhai sect who were excitedly talking amongst themselves. There was such a larger number of disciples that they were all standing shoulder to shoulder. Looking down from above, it looked like thousands upon thousands of ants. On the top of the cliffs surrounding the gorge, there was also a large crowd of people looking down at the gorge. They were all staring at the people in the arena. These people all had sharp expressions on their faces. There was a powerful chi which was filling the atmosphere around the arena. There were some people within the gorge who were extremely strong compared to the average disciple of the sect. They were the high-level disciples of the sect. Nan Gongling many years ago was one of those disciples. Nan Gongling sat in the middle of the high-level Yun Hai sect disciples and elders. Those participating in the elite disciple exam were some of the most important disciples of the Yun Hai sect. It was the first time in many years that there were so many ordinary disciples who would attend elite disciple exam. Some of them were going to become elite disciples within the sect, and some of the strongest participants could even become core disciples. Of course, some of them were going to be eliminated from the exam altogether. That was the rule. Fight and win or be eliminated. Ordinary disciples who sat the exam might have to fight with the current elite disciples. The battles were randomly arranged. If the ordinary disciple won, he would probably be chosen to become an elite disciple. If an elite disciple lost, he lost face and reputation. On the same basis, if an elite disciple wanted to become a core disciple, he would then need to fight a core disciple and win. If an elite disciple could defeat a core disciple, then he could become one of the core disciples and would definitely gain a lot of prestige and recognition from the high-ranking members of the Yun Hai sect. The rules were very simple. You would have to fight repeatedly. Fighting an elite disciple would enable an ordinary disciple a chance at promotion. There were people at the elite disciple exam who had big arrogant smiles on their face from winning, and there were others who looked depressed as they were eliminated. It was the first time in the year that all of the ordinary disciples, elite disciples and the core disciples were present in one place. It was the second time this year that the ordinary, elite and core disciples were going to be ranked. No matter if it was an ordinary, an elite or a core disciple whose ranking was in the top 10, he would gain an infinite amount of prestige within the sect. Furthermore, the disciples who showed the most potential and placed at the top would receive great rewards such as precious stones, weapons, profound pills, or maybe even extremely powerful skill books. Obviously, the elite disciples and core disciples who would get eliminated or not obtain a good ranking would be humiliated. If the disciple had bad luck, then the opponent could be very strong and humiliation would be inevitable. This is why all disciples would fight with their utmost power if they wanted to achieve the best results. Losing because of underestimating an opponent would bring shame and humiliation. Lin Feng and his group had arrived at the life and death arena. When they arrived, the elite disciple exam had already started. Coincidentally, ordinary disciples were challenging elite disciples. At that moment, two people were fighting on the rocky stage of the life or death arena. The fight was very intense and the crowd continued to discuss the battle as they watched it very closely. It's Lu Fei. She said earlier that she had broken through to the Ling Qi layer. Obviously it's true. She's very pretty and on top of that she's incredibly strong and powerful. I wish she could become my wife in the future, said Han Man, who was looking at the battle of Lu Fei while laughing. Lu Fei was a dream for many of the young disciples. They all wanted her to become their lover. Lu Fei was famous for being extremely beautiful in the Yun Hai sect. Many of the young disciples would spend their entire lives within the sect, and would even take a wife from the sect. This is why many men were courting her, including some geniuses and even core disciples. The rumor said that Lu Fei was pretty and that she was a real genius. In other words, she was amazing. Haha. Go ahead and ask her to become your wife, Lin Feng said while laughing at Han Man. That simpleton had even dared to imagine such a thing. Lu Fei was too much of a tomboy for him. She was violent and stubborn. He would not last a second. Hehe. I think that I'm pretty strong, but I don't think I'd manage to court her, said Han Man while laughing and scratching his head. He then continued while looking at Lin Feng and said, By the way, Lin Feng, I heard that you got along quite well with Lu Fei. She's very beautiful and you're very handsome. You are both geniuses. You would definitely be a perfect couple. Me? Asked Lin Feng with a shiver running down his spine. He shrugged his shoulders and shook away the feeling from that shiver. He was so scared that it may become reality that he would have trouble sleeping later that night. Lin Feng raised his head and looked at the people around. His attention focused on a particular person. Wuxia, during this elite disciple exam, I will take care of you, thought Lin Feng while smiling coldly. He had precisely rushed to the exam because of Wuxia. It looked like Wuxia could feel a dark premonition and felt like darkness itself was staring at him. He stopped looking at the arena and observed the crowd. He was glancing at everyone trying to find the source of his premonition. At that moment, Lu Fei released her spirit and effortlessly won the battle. Her bow and arrows were radiating a brilliant light as she stepped out of the arena. Lin Feng was looking at her with new eyes. For Lu Fei, joining the elite disciples wouldn't be something which would make her extremely proud. She looked around her and heaved a sigh. She had broken through to the Lingqi layer and her spirit had awakened. She had the same spirit as her father in the past. But she still couldn't beat the person on her mind. Unfortunately, Lin Feng had gone to gather some precious items and had been killed because of Wuxia. If he was still here, I could learn so much from him and I would certainly be able to greatly improve my strength. She didn't know why, but Lu Fei suddenly missed Lin Feng. That unconventional and unrestrained genius. But he did have some detestable aspects. If she had the choice, Lu Fei would prefer to be fighting against Lin Feng and winning against him to that of participating in the elite disciple exam and becoming an elite disciple. At the same time, back at the pavilion was Protector Bei, who was staring blankly at the horizon while watching Lu Fei, who had just won her battle. Not bad, Lu Fei, a real genius, but you still have a lot to do before reaching your father's level. It will be hard to achieve his power while not growing in the Imperial City. Protector Bei's thoughts were flowing at full speed. Imperial City. These two words made him shiver, but they were very clear to him. It was a very crowded place. There were lots of political strategies which were involved in the day-to-day life of the city. This was a gathering place for many strong cultivators. Song Lan was still there to protect her, but if he wasn't, maybe Lu Fei would get into trouble. I wanted to let Lin Feng go to the Imperial City. Not only would he have become more important by moving up in the hierarchy, but it would have also enabled him to fight against stronger cultivators. At the same time, he could have helped Song Lan. And maybe he would have met his destiny there. While Protector Bei was thinking these things, he started to grow furious and wanted to kill Wuxia yet again. Because of Wuxia, who had killed Lin Feng, Protector Bei slowly realized that his dream was impossible. And these painful thoughts flowed like a stream of blood as his face turned red with anger. Lin Feng didn't know that there were so many people that missed him. At that moment, he noticed someone else. Lin Feng, you're here as well. What a coincidence. Jing Yun was walking towards Lin Feng. Her expression looked fresh and pure like spring. What a great coincidence, said Lin Feng while looking at Jing Yun and smiling. Han Man, Jing Yun and Lin Feng were finally together again after what seemed like an extremely long time. It's not a coincidence, it's called fate, said Han Man smiling. Jing Yun, I am the biggest person in the group. How come you only saw Lin Feng and not me? Lin Feng was glaring at Han Man. That couldn't be true. Who would know someone like you? Asked Jing Yun while pouting. Alright, if you don't know me then I should just go. I am starting to remember that there was a young girl who was waiting for Lin Feng every day, wondering when she would see him again, said Han Man with a fake smile on his face. Lin Feng was speechless. Since when was there a girl like that? How would I know something like that? Replied Jing Yun while blushing. She looked so delicate and charming that it was touching. Han Man couldn't help but burst into laughter. Pajun, who was standing next to them, looked at Lin Feng with a wry smile on his face. He was truly heartless to join in and laugh at Lin Feng. You guys, can you shut your filthy mouths? At that moment, a cold voice had shouted at them which had destroyed their good mood. They all looked at the person who had spoken. It was an elite disciple carrying a sword on his back, and he was looking at them with a look of disdain. Does it look like we were talking to you? Han Man said furiously. That guy was incredibly impolite, so Han Man could not hold his temper. You are courting death, said the disciple carrying a sword on his back. A strong chi suddenly emerged from his body. It's you, said Lin Feng. It was really a huge coincidence. Lin Feng recognized that disciple. It was the elite disciple who had helped Lu Fei during their fight in the Stormy Gorge. It was Yu Hao, the one who said he would kill Lin Feng if Lu Fei asked it of him. He had actually almost killed him twice with that sword on his back. He was extremely strong. Yu Hao was stupefied when he heard Lin Feng. He attentively looked at Lin Feng and then remembered him. He then smiled and said, "Last time you were lucky that I didn't kill you. Are you that impatient that you want to die now?" "Impatient?" said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. He just regretted that he hadn't broken through to the Ling Qi layer on their last meeting, otherwise, he would have unsheathed his sword and beheaded Yu Hao. "I am very impatient when it comes to living my life. I have such a long life to live after all," said Lin Feng, smiling coldly with a strangely evil look on his face. "I am very impatient when it comes to living my life. I have such a long life to live after all," said Lin Feng, smiling coldly with a strangely evil look on his face. "I have met many pieces of trash in the past, but I've never met a piece of trash who was so impatient to die," said Yu Hao with extreme arrogance. He then added, "Since you really want to die, I will help you achieve your goal. Wait until the end of the elite disciple exam, and then I will deal with you." An ordinary disciple was worth nothing to most people within the sect. They could be killed at a whim and nobody would care, especially when in the life and death arena of the Stormy Gorge. "I will give you an opportunity to kill me before the end of the elite disciple exam," Lin Feng said while nodding his head as if he had come to a decision. Yu Hao was lost and didn't know what Lin Feng meant. Immediately after, Lin Feng started walking towards the life and death arena. "Lin Feng, what are you doing?" Jing Yun shouted as she could feel the fear gripping her heart. "Jing Yun, you have to trust Lin Feng. That guy is always full of surprises," said Han Man to Jing Yun, trying to reassure her. Even though they hadn't been friends for a very long time, Han Man really admired Lin Feng. He was beyond insane, but he was truly a genius. He would fight anyone at the drop of a hat when it came to his friends. Each time they met, Lin Feng did something unpredictable. Jing Yun tried not to worry, but she could only make her heart grow slightly calmer. She looked at Han Man and nodded. That's right, it looked like Lin Feng was going to do something dangerous and unpredictable again. Jing Yun couldn't help but be worried about Lin Feng. Going into the life and death arena and challenging an elite disciple wasn't something one could do easily. If you wanted to become an elite disciple within the sect, then you first had to have an incredible strength. Luck was of no use. To become an elite disciple, the only way was to be stronger than a former elite disciple. Huh? Yu Hao frowned. He hadn't replied yet. Han Man and Jing Yun understood what Lin Feng wanted to do because they were friends with him and could understand him. Besides, Yu Hao was extremely arrogant. How could he imagine what Lin Feng wanted to do? Yu Hao smiled at Lu Fei, who had already made her way out of the arena. He moved towards Lu Fei. Such a beautiful girl needed attention, and who better than him to give it to her? The life and death arena was huge. Disciples could fight against other disciples on different rocky fighting stages. While the battles were randomly picked, they could also fight each other as they wished. However, it seemed like there was an unwritten agreement between everybody to not step onto a fighting stage if there were already too many people fighting. This was also beneficial for the observers as they could only focus on a certain amount of action at once. If everyone started to fight, then it would quickly become chaos. Of course, no one had any plans to step onto the highest stage. Ordinary disciples didn't want to seem too self-confident in their abilities. Overestimating their own powers would give the seniors of the sect a bad impression. Only real geniuses, the most talented disciples, would dare climb onto the highest stage and amaze the entire crowd. At that moment, Wang Mang stepped onto a stage within the life and death arena. But at that moment he saw that someone else wanted to get onto it as well. "Hey friend!" shouted Wang Mang while smiling at Lin Feng to get his attention. He was the third-ranked ordinary disciple. He was extremely strong and had the arrogance of a ranked disciple who had not seen the world. He assumed that Lin Feng would notice he wanted to get on the stage and would let him go first. But what Wang Mang hadn't planned is that Lin Feng stared at him and nodded to return the greeting while looking indifferent. He then continued walking towards the fighting stage. It really did look like Lin Feng wasn't going to let him go first. Wang Mang frowned. He was extremely famous amongst all the ordinary disciples. He wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng wouldn't give him face and let him go first. He wanted to open his mouth, but he was speechless. He was too stupefied at what had happened. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words could come out. "Crazy moron," said Wang Mang in a low voice filled with anger. He immediately went back to where he was standing before. That other disciple was heading towards the central fighting stage. How insolent! This was the first time that someone dared to go onto it. Wang Meng wasn't the only one who was surprised, but the entire crowd was stupefied to see someone go on that particular fighting stage. Their eyes were wide open. The crowd burst into an uproar and was wondering who that guy was. It's him. So he wasn't devoured by the imaginary demon? He's surprisingly still living, said someone who had seen Lin Feng at the moment when he had been consumed by the black fog of the imaginary demon. The person was stupefied to see Lin Feng living and breathing before him. Oh my! He is insane. Han Man, Jing Yun as well as Pajun were all astounded. Lin Feng did not fail to surprise them. However, Han Man had a big smile on his face. He had the feeling that Lin Feng was stronger than him, much stronger than him. He even had that feeling when he hadn't seen Lin Feng. He really admired Lin Feng and believed that he held an incredible strength. In the stormy gorge, Wuxia was stupefied. How was this possible? How could Lin Feng still be alive? He was just an ordinary disciple and he had been eaten by an imaginary demon. How could he come back alive? It's him. Like everybody else, Nan Gongling was also astonished. His face showed how relieved he was. Now he would be able to tell Protector Bei and Protector Kong that Lin Feng was alright and the punishment of Wuxia would not be so harsh. Haha, that young man never dies, said a voice coming from the pavilion where an old man was sitting. It almost sounded like he was cursing, but he was actually very cheerful. You continue to surprise me, young man, thought Protector Bei smiling. The first time that he had met Lin Feng, he had already had a good impression. The second time, Lin Feng had made the drums of the precipice of Zhanggu beat, which had stupefied Protector Kong and Protector Bei. And this time, he had been eaten by an imaginary demon and then returned without a single injury on his body. He really was the king of miracles. At that moment, Yu Hao arrived next to Lu Fei. He looked at Lin Feng, who had stepped on the fighting stage, and said while laughing, "Fei Fei, that piece of trash surprisingly dares go onto the fighting stage. He really wants to die." Lu Fei frowned. She didn't like Yu Hao calling her by a nickname. She was in a bad mood because of this. Then she looked at the fighting stage and her expression immediately changed. Her beautiful eyes were filled with delight. He is not dead. Lu Fei was astonished, and then a beautiful and resplendent smile appeared on her face. You're not dead. That's a good thing. I will beat you myself. I will humiliate you. Yu Hao saw that Lu Fei was smiling and looked enchanted, but he didn't seem to understand. Then thinking that he could be her hero, he said, Fei Fei, just like last time, you just need to open your mouth and I'll go kill them piece of trash when he's done with his challenge. You'll kill him? Lu Fei asked while looking at Yu Hao. Even though Yu Hao had a sword spirit and was quite strong, he hadn't progressed for a year because he hadn't been practicing. He was still at the first Ling Qi layer. If he fought against Lin Feng, did he even stand a chance? Besides, what Lu Fei wanted the most was to defeat Lin Feng herself. Yes, you only have to nod your head and I'll put an end to his life, said Yu Hao while smiling. Yu Hao? Yu Hao was still smiling when the sound of an annoyed voice went straight into his ears. Yu Hao, where have you run away? Come and fight me, damn you. Lin Feng was standing on the highest fighting stage. He raised his head and looked at everyone who was observing from above on the cliffs of the stormy gorge. He wanted to go to the highest place, the most craziest of places, and look down on the world. Yu Hao was still smiling. He hadn't gone to the fighting stage. He hadn't understood what Lin Feng had meant a moment ago. He did not understand that Lin Feng was actually challenging him to a fight. However, he really wanted to fight with Lin Feng. During the elite disciple exam, being challenged was a humiliation because it meant you were weak. If you were weak, people wanted to fight against you. But at that moment, Yu Hao was being challenged. On top of that, he was being challenged by the one he wanted to kill to win the affection of Lu Fei. However, he hadn't thought that Lin Feng would challenge him right after he finished talking. Obviously, he had just been humiliated in front of a countless number of people. He had the feeling he had just been slapped in the face. Yu Hao's expression looked like that of a demon. He was staring at Lin Feng with a cruel expression. Fei Fei, that guy wants to challenge me, that's great. I'm going to kill that shitty piece of trash. As before, Yu Hao had no doubts about his own strength. He started walking towards the stage while still looking evil. The entire crowd was amazed. Lin Feng was truly insane. Not only had Lin Feng immediately stepped on the highest fighting stage, but he was also challenging Yu Hao. Yu Hao was far from being one of the weakest elite disciples. Before the elite disciple exam, ordinary disciples had already checked the profiles of the different elite disciples. They had access to a list which contained detailed information on their strength levels. Yu Hao was far above the weak elite disciples. He had a sword spirit and he was very talented and strong. He was much stronger than most of the average elite disciples. Nobody would have thought of challenging him. Yu Hao hadn't expected someone to challenge him either. As he moved on to the fighting stage, Yu Hao, while still looking like a demon, said, "I wanted to let you live a bit longer, but you already want to die. So impatient. I'm in no hurry to deal with you. Wait until I am done," said Lin Feng while smiling. He stopped looking at Yu Hao and turned to the crowd. "Li Lin, get your ass onto the damn fighting stage as well." Lin Feng continued to spit insults in the faces of elite disciples. Li Lin, while in the Xingqian pavilion, hadn't dared to confront Chan Chan, so he had decided to take it out on Lin Feng. Lin Feng still remembered and planned to settle his grudge. Everybody in the crowd was astonished at his actions. Li Lin. That was the name of another elite disciple. What did he intend to do by challenging two elite disciples at the same time? During the first round of the elite disciple exam, everyone had to be in attendance, elite disciples as well as core disciples, because they could be challenged at any time by another disciple within the sect. During the first round of the elite disciple exam, everyone had to be in attendance, elite disciples as well as core disciples, because they could be challenged at any time by another disciple within the sect. Li Lin was no exception to this rule. When Li Lin heard that he was being challenged by Lin Feng, his heart was pounding. That guy had probably broken through to the Ling Qi lair and wanted his revenge. But then Li Lin tried to relax because Lin Feng hadn't only called his name, instead he had called too. His name and Yu Hao's. Yu Hao was infinitely stronger than Li Lin. He had an overpowering sword spirit and he was known as a genius. Lin Feng had even dared to challenge him, but he was probably going to die because he could not fight against Yu Hao. When entering the life and death arena, Li Lin started to get nervous. When he saw that everybody was looking at him, he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. "What are you doing? Why are you making him come onto the fighting stage as well?" asked Yu Hao, glancing at Li Lin. He was puzzled. Besides, he despised being associated with a weakling like Li Lin. "I will fight both of you at the same time." Lin Feng didn't reply to Yu Hao and just said these words in a cold tone which made Yu Hao frown in anger. Insanity. Madness. In the entire history of the Yunhai sect, which dated back 1,000 years, nobody had ever dared challenge two higher-ranked disciples at the same time during the elite disciple exam. Lin Feng, a simple ordinary disciple, had challenged two elite disciples to fight against him. To make things even more shocking, one of them was an extremely strong cultivator who had a sword spirit. Lin Feng had broken a new record of insane behavior. That ordinary disciple is so arrogant and clearly overestimates his own power. Even if he is incredibly strong, is it right to act in such a way? Wuxia had said that in a cold and belittling tone. Not only was Wuxia very strong, but he also had a high status within the sect. Besides, his father Lan was standing behind him. Therefore, he was trying to regain some of the face he had already lost. Nan Gongling was coldly looking at Wuxia, but remained expressionless. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Regarding Protector Bei, he was just laughing and shaking his head. This young man really has no limits. Together? Who do you think you are, you piece of trash? Yu Hao's face twisted in anger and revealed a hideous expression. What kind of person was he after all? A sword master with a strong sword spirit, and he was an elite disciple? Yu Hao despised Lin Feng. He thought that Lin Feng was an insolent piece of trash. He thought that comparing the two was the difference between earth and heaven. Yu Hao thought that it was an honor for Lin Feng to call a noble person such as himself onto the stage. But Lin Feng had not only called him onto the stage, he had also called someone else. Surprisingly, he wanted to fight against two people at the same time. Wasn't Yu Hao being humiliated from his actions? Exactly. What are you thinking? Suddenly challenging both of us at the same time. Yu Hao has an extremely strong sword spirit. He's very powerful and can kill you with a single strike. How can you be so arrogant? Li Lin was licking Yu Hao's boots and trying to gain favor from Yu Hao. Then Yu Hao would do all the work alone and defeat Lin Feng while he could just stand and watch. Then he would not have to fight at all. This was obviously the best choice for someone like him who was incredibly weak for an elite disciple. Yu Hao seemed to enjoy being complimented by others. A big smile had appeared on his face and he then said, "Haha, Li Lin, you're entirely right. It's not worth unsheathing my sword for such a worthless ordinary disciple. You help me take care of him." Of course. But for such a worthless ordinary disciple to dare to challenge Yu Hao, he should be humiliated. Fellow disciple Yu Hao should show him how big the difference is between you and him. When Li Lin heard Yu Hao's words, he got frightened that he would have to fight. He didn't know if Yu Hao wanted him to fight, so he did his best to lure Yu Hao into fighting alone. He really did not want to engage in a battle with Lin Feng. That guy is such a disgrace for our mighty sect. He's making all of the members of the Yun Hai sect lose face, said members of the crowd while looking at Li Lin. He was so shameless. But that guy actually had to defend his point of view. You are so pathetic. Lin Feng was sneering at Li Lin. Li Lin, when I was looking for skills in the Xingqian pavilion, you attacked Chen Chan and then you ended up being scared to death by him, causing everybody to laugh at you. Coincidentally, there was another ordinary disciple there, so you decided to pick a fight with me. You also threatened me that you would kill me. You insulted me several times and called me a piece of trash. Now I challenge you and you seem to be terrified. How come? Yu Hao, you who have a mighty sword spirit, what a genius. You attacked me without any reason on that day. You said that you could kill me anytime, but it seems like you were just bullying me and trying to humiliate those weaker than yourself. Now I am standing in front of you willing to fight, but where is your sword? Lin Feng said in a very cold tone. Everybody in the crowd understood what had happened. These two elite disciples were very pretentious. They had both provoked and bullied that ordinary disciple, but now that he had become stronger, he wanted to get his revenge. Yu Hao's face grew vicious and he said to Li Lin, "I will give you 3 seconds. If you don't attack him within that time, I will cripple your cultivation." Li Lin was furious. He was gnashing his teeth in hatred for Yu Hao. On that day, Yu Hao had bullied Lin Feng and treated him as if he was an insignificant existence. At that moment, Lin Feng's behavior towards him was strangely similar. "Alright, I will start and then you finish him," Li Lin said against his will. He was really forcing himself to fight. He then started moving towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng shook his head. His style looked incredibly laughable. Lin Feng really wondered how that guy had managed to become an elite disciple. Get lost. Lin Feng then thrust his palm into the air and used his 8 strikes of desolation. 4 strikes immediately broke through the air and crashed onto Li Lin's body. Boom! 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 Li Lin was one of the weakest elite disciples. His strength was so low that he could not match some ordinary disciples. Lin Feng had hit him with a single skill while not even using his full strength, and that had made him fly through the air and heavily crash outside the life and death arena main stage. Lin Feng ignored Li Lin after that and said to Yu Hao, "So what are you waiting for? I thought you were going to kill me. 4 strikes. That's all? That's only half of 8 strikes, how laughable." Yu Hao knew what attack Lin Feng had used. In the Yun Hai sect, many people had learnt and practiced it to a similar level. Most elite disciples who had practiced it had managed to do 4 strikes and some talented individual had done 5. But there were very few people who managed to do more than 4 strikes within the elite disciple. It was extremely rare to see someone talented enough to break through 4 strikes. Lin Feng had only used 4 of the 8 possible strikes, but he could freely control how many strikes he used. He did not want to use his full strength when dealing with Li Lin. "Even though I said I would kill you, today is the elite disciple exam. Even though we are in the life and death arena, we are not allowed to directly kill. So today I will just cripple your cultivation and break both of your arms. You will be half dead when we finish this battle." Yu Hao was already very cruel to begin with, and now he had hatred towards Lin Feng. While talking, Yu Hao was unsheathed the sword that he was carrying on his back. His sword was already glowing and its light was radiant. The glowing light looked like the water of a river as sunlight shone down upon it. It was a truly dazzling light. An intangible chi started spreading through the air. That wouldn't be enough though. Yu Hao released his sword spirit. It was an extremely sharp sword shadow which appeared behind him. It was pointing towards the heavens as if it was about to cut down the heavens themselves. Even though those who possess a sword spirit are not weak, Lin Feng is also dangerous. The disciples in the crowd who were close to the arena could sense the strength and power contained within the sword qi. They had the sensation that they were being pressured by the power of Yu, which made them feel dizzy and uncomfortable. However, Lin Feng, who was standing much closer, had no reaction. I know that you like to rely on your sword spirit, so I will show you what it really means to be a sword master, Lin Feng said with a voice filled with killing intent. He then unsheathed the sword he was carrying on his back, and a powerful qi spread through the atmosphere moving towards Yu Hao's sword. The pressure within the atmosphere suddenly increased greatly. What, he's also a sword user? Does he have a sword spirit? Everybody was shaking when they sensed the qi contained within Lin Feng's sword. Yu Hao was also stupefied. Everyone was shocked because Lin Feng had unleashed this pressure without releasing a sword spirit. Lin Feng had a faintly discernible smile on the corner of his mouth. Why would he use sword skills if he doesn't have a sword spirit? Yu Hao made a step forwards. Suddenly, a whistling noise spread throughout the atmosphere. The devastating sword qi was growing more and more powerful. The sword spirit behind his back was also glowing brighter and brighter. Yu Hao's sword qi was getting stronger and cutting through the atmosphere, moving straight towards Lin Feng. Do you necessarily need to have a sword spirit to use sword skills? Can the cultivators who possess a sword spirit only use sword skills? Asked Lin Feng, looking extremely calm. He stepped forward and said, even with your sword spirit you don't understand the basic principles of wielding a sword. Boom! Suddenly an extremely strong qi shot towards Yu Hao. Even his own qi was retreating from the qi which had been unleashed. Lin Feng had started to gather sword force into the tip of his sword. The power which was released was incredible. Force, he is using sword force. People in the crowd seldom saw cultivators who had knowledge of forces, and when they saw some, they were usually battles between elite disciples and core disciples. Everyone had started to sense the immense power that was contained within his sword. The crowd was growing more shocked. So that's sword force. How powerful! There was an infinite amount of qi which was also released from the sword. This had allowed Lin Feng to utterly suppress Yu Hao. Oh my! He's only an ordinary disciple who just broke through to the Ling Qi layer, and he already controls his sword force to perfection. What a genius! Some people knew that forces were extremely hard to understand and control, especially at Lin Feng's level. Even some cultivators who had reached the peak of the Ling Qi layer were not necessarily able to control forces to the extent of Lin Feng, but Lin Feng seemed to master the forces to perfection. Of course, some of the ordinary disciples didn't even know what a force was, and were asking other disciples how Lin Feng had such a powerful and oppressive sword. He's the one who beat the drums at the precipice of Zhanggu. He's so young and already extremely powerful. I could only dream to be that strong at his age. He definitely deserves a high status within the sect. He truly deserved the title of a true genius. We should take good care of him and honor him. He will become the future of the sect. Nan Gongling understood what Protector Bei had been talking about previously, and now understood why Lin Feng was so important. He was a pillar of the sect. A solution had to be found so that Wuxia wouldn't attempt to kill him again. That young man was a genius. Nan Gongling felt happy, but Wuxia was not happy in the slightest. He had an evil look covering his face. Nan Gongling felt happy, but Wuxia was not happy in the slightest. He had an evil look covering his face. That young man is too outstanding. He should have been killed at birth. Wuxia thought evilly. Lin Feng had humiliated him, so even if he was a genius, he had to be killed, and Wuxia couldn't afford to wait until Lin Feng grew up, as he would become too strong. In the middle of the crowd, Han Man felt at ease. He had a smile on the corner of his lips. He really has become so strong already. He even managed to convince me that I might be stronger. When he saw that Lin Feng was stronger than him, he was really happy for his sworn brother. Jing Yun, who was standing next to him, also had a brilliant smile on her face. She looked like a lotus flower in blossom. Her smile looked so pure and innocent, it could charm any man who saw. Pajun, who was standing next to them, had a sparkle in his eyes while looking at Lin Feng on the fighting stage. He thought, No wonder he was able to react so quickly against me and with such a terrifying strength. He was this powerful. Inside the life and death arena, Yu Hao's face was turning deathly pale. His face had become so pale and cold that he already looked like a corpse. Even with your sword spirit, you don't understand the basic principles of wielding a sword. Lin Feng had destroyed his honor and dignity. He had no choice but to agree with his statement, and he was not the only one. Everybody in the crowd had agreed. Yu Hao didn't understand basic sword principles. Compared with Lin Feng, he looked like a child holding a toy sword. Who was it that said, only those who had a sword spirit could become amazing sword masters? Every single trace of sword chi emerging from Yu Hao's body was vanishing as fast as it had appeared. It was crumbling and disintegrating each time he tried to release it. Controlling forces like he did, Lin Feng wasn't consuming much energy, and the sword force was growing extremely powerful. I give up. You can become an elite disciple. Yu Hao had been struggling with his pride but had finally said those words. He just had the feeling that he had been truly humiliated, and that the entire crowd was laughing at him for thinking he was so powerful. Give up? Lin Feng was smiling coldly. Could he really be let off so easily? When Yu Hao thought his victory was certain, and he would easily overpower Lin Feng, he had wanted to cripple Lin Feng's cultivation. He wanted to break his arms and leave him half dead. It was impossible for him to be crueler than that. At the moment when Yu Hao found out that he couldn't compete with Lin Feng, he thought that one sentence was going to be enough to purify the hatred between them. Was that how things really worked? Well, Lin Feng didn't agree. Do I need to accept? Said Lin Feng, making fun of his actions. Lin Feng continued moving forwards, and the sword force became even more powerful. It was oppressing Yu Hao's body so much that he could no longer breathe. I said I give up. What do you want me to do? Yu Hao's face changed. Lin Feng didn't stop moving closer. How terrifying. What do I want? That is very simple. I want you to do to yourself what you had said you would do to me, said Lin Feng with an ice-cold smile on his face. Yu Hao was shaking from head to toe. Lin Feng wanted him to cripple his own cultivation and break his own arms. This was a death sentence. He wanted him to commit suicide. This is the elite disciple exam of the Yun Hai sect. How dare you? Shouted Yu Hao. You may not dare to kill me, but shall we see if I dare to kill you? Lin Feng was moving closer while replying to Yu Hao. His sword slightly shook. A terrifyingly strong sword chi invaded the entire atmosphere and shot towards Yu Hao while piercing through the air. A deadly sword which existed solely to take the life of others. In the blink of an eye, Yu Hao's blood sprayed everywhere. His body collapsed lifelessly on the stage. His eyes were still wide open as if he was shocked at his own death. It looked like he couldn't believe that Lin Feng had actually dared to kill him. Phew! It seemed like the atmosphere had become tense. The entire crowd was holding their breath in shock. The arena had become so quiet that they could almost hear each other's heartbeat. Lin Feng had set a new record in the entire history of the Yun Hai sect. He had challenged and defeated 2 elite disciples at the same time. He had then ruthlessly killed one of them in front of the entire sect. Lin Feng had violated the rules of the Yun Hai sect in the presence of every disciple, every elder, and even the patriarch of the sect Nan Gong Ling. He had killed his opponent during the elite disciple exam. Audacious! An extremely loud shout spread throughout the area. It sounded like it was coming from above. The entire crowd was surprised and had the feeling they had been awoken from a dream, as they could barely come to grips with what had just happened. In the presence of every member of the Yun Hai sect, you really have no respect for the rules and no respect for the patriarch either. You are guilty of crimes for which even death cannot atone. There was a loud shout. It sounded like that person really wanted to kill Lin Feng on the spot. The disciples in the crowd raised their heads and saw Wuxia. Some people didn't understand what was going on, but when they saw Wuxia, it had become clear. Wuxia and Lin Feng were enemies, and Wuxia wanted to take advantage of the fact that Lin Feng was still weak. He could not let that young disciple become someone important and grow stronger than himself. If he did, then he would surely be killed. Therefore, he directly accused him of various crimes and then said that he had to die for his grave crimes. Lin Feng raised his head and saw Wuxia. He just glanced at him for a second and then ignored him. He had joined the elite disciple exam, stepped on the highest fighting stage, and had amazed the entire crowd. He had challenged 2 elite disciples at the same time. He had used sword force and had killed Yu Hao on the spot. He had done all of this for Mo Xia. Lin Feng had willingly given Mo Xia an opportunity to find excuses to kill him. He had hoped that Mo Xia would use these excuses to confront him. It was clear to Lin Feng that if he didn't do it himself, Mo Xia would continue to plot against him. Lin Feng had just delivered himself to Mo Xia with a neat ribbon. This was all part of his plan. When Mo Xia saw that Lin Feng was ignoring him, he became so furious that he was shaking from head to toe in anger. However, in his heart he was smiling coldly. He shouted, "Everybody, arrest this traitor, and if he tries to resist, kill him on the spot." When the crowd heard Mo Xia's words, they were disappointed. He was really beyond shameless. That elder's behavior was really impudent and cruel. It was clear that he was using his power in the sect to settle personal grudges. Bastard, cursed Han man. Everybody had heard him. Yu Hao wanted to cripple Lin Feng's cultivation, then break his arms and leave Lin Feng half dead. Was anything that Lin Feng had done unjustified? Jing Yun's face also turned livid. She was so scared for Lin Feng's safety. If that elder is really shameless, what a disgrace, cursed Lu Fei. Mo Xia had already used this trick once, yet was he going to give it another try? A few silhouettes flashed through the air towards the fighting stage, ready to catch Lin Feng. "Wait! Wait!" shouted a voice which made the silhouettes, who were heading towards Lin Feng, immediately stop. The one who had stopped them was Nan Gongling. Everybody turned around and looked at Nan Gongling. They were all curious to see how Nan Gongling was going to handle the situation. Was he going to punish Lin Feng? "Patriarch, that young disciple is presumptuous and arrogant. You don't exist in his eyes. You must punish him. It will be a warning for others as well." Mo Xia had come next to Nan Gongling and was slightly bowing, showing him respect with the intention to persuade him. He also quickly glanced at the people standing next to Nan Gongling. "Elder Mo Xia is right. That ordinary disciple is too aggressive. He does not give the sect any respect. He will ruthlessly kill all his fellow disciples. We must kill him. Patriarch, his punishment should be death. We should kill him." A few elders were supporting Mo Xia. Mo Tsonglan had served the sect for a longer period than Nan Gongling. In the Yunhai sect, all these elders wanted to give him face, so they would obviously jump at the chance to support his son, Mo Xia. Nan Gongling raised his head. He looked at Mo Xia and all the elders who were getting involved. He then said indifferently, "Have you finished talking yet?" All the elders were stupefied. They didn't know what Nan Gongling meant by those words. "Mo Xia, are you the patriarch of this sect? Or is it me, Nan Gongling, who is the current patriarch of this sect?" He said that while paying no heed to anyone else but Mo Xia. Mo Xia was speechless. He then hastily replied, "You, of course. You are the patriarch. I wouldn't dare." He was then interrupted again. "What about all of you? Am I the patriarch of this sect, or is Mo Xia the patriarch?" asked Nan Gongling to the elders who were supporting Mo Xia. "You, of course," replied the elders, feeling a slight chill run down their spines. Nan Gongling was a moderate person and never lost his temper. He had never talked to them in that way, but it was clear at this moment that he was angry. "Oh," said Nan Gongling while nodding, "then I would like to ask you, who is in charge of the elite disciple exam?" "The patriarch, of course," replied Mo Xia and the others elders in unison. Their backs were soaked with a cold sweat. They had really picked the wrong time to support Mo Xia. "So you all know. Since you all know, then I would like to ask you, Mo Xia, you say that in this young disciple's eyes the sect is of no importance, then what about you? In my presence, in the presence of every member of the sect, you are shouting loudly and trying to act like the patriarch. And you even want to handle things of which I am responsible. How imposing. Elder Mo Xia, you tell me, do you even attach any importance to me or the sect?" Nan Gongling's voice dropped in volume. It seemed like there was a cold breeze blowing in the air over the crowd. Mo Xia and the other elders felt that they were in a very bad position. The elders who had been supporting Mo Xia a moment before didn't say anything, which was their only option at this point. Mo Xia thought that because his father was Mo Tsonglan that he could usurp all powers of the sect for himself. Mo Xia's behavior and words had finally made Nan Gongling furious. Crack! A loud noise pierced the silent atmosphere of the arena. The chair on which Nan Gongling sat had shattered under the pressure. Speak. I want to ask all of you elders, do you still see me, Nan Gongling, as the patriarch of the Yunhai sect, and am I of any importance in your eyes? Nan Gongling stood up and shouted coldly at the elders. He had gone completely insane with anger. The elders felt their hearts drop and fear spread throughout their bodies. What role did they play in the sect anyway? Could they compare with the patriarch? Everybody was looking at Nan Gongling, who was furious. His eyes looked like he was calm, which made it even more terrifying. His temperament was actually very good, and he was never usually angry. What could have caused him to act in such a way? He had suddenly lost temper. And on top of that, it was because of Wuxia. Wuxia had never been as shocked and scared as he had been when he saw Nan Gongling growing furious. He had to think carefully about what his next words would be. He bowed respectfully, then said, Patriarch, Wuxia admits his mistake. Wuxia had never been as shocked and scared as he had been when he saw Nan Gongling growing furious. He had to think carefully about what his next words would be. He bowed respectfully, then said, Patriarch, Wuxia admits his mistake. Wuxia and Emotsonglan had power in the Yunhai sect, but Nan Gongling was the patriarch. Nan Gongling had become furious at Wuxia's actions. Wuxia had no choice but to admit his mistake. Maybe I am too aggressive and too arrogant. Maybe I've been disrespectful to the patriarch, said Wuxia while insulting himself and acting humble. When Nan Gongling saw that Wuxia acknowledged his mistakes, he started to calm down. He coldly glanced at Wuxia and said, Since you acknowledge your mistake, let's forget about it this time. If this happens again, then there will be no more chances. Regarding the disciple on stage, Yu Hao was the first to provoke him and state his intent. He threatened that he would cripple the cultivation of this young disciple, then planned to break his arms. He showed no intention of having any mercy and only gave the impression of cruelty. This was then returned on to him. But Patriarch, Wuxia wanted to speak again. He hadn't understood the reason why Nan Gongling was furious after all. Nan Gongling glanced at him furiously. Wuxia swallowed his previous thoughts and forced himself to say, Patriarch, you are wise and brilliant. Nan Gongling groaned. He didn't really care about what Wuxia had to say. He then looked at Lin Feng and said, What's your name? Lin Feng raised his head and looked at Nan Gongling. He looked incredibly calm at this moment. Lin Feng, good job. You are now an elite disciple of the Yunhai sect, declared Nan Gongling. Nan Gongling was really impressed by Lin Feng's abilities and actions. He personally asked Lin Feng his name and personally gave him the status of an elite disciple. Many others would never have that privilege. The other disciples would need to check the results with the elder in charge of the elite disciple exam. Lin Feng was smiling from ear to ear. His smile seemed to be filled with a strange feeling which wasn't gratitude. His smile contained the feeling of accomplishment. Only those who are strong enough can demand respect. Nan Gongling hadn't forgotten that Lin Feng had once said words in that respect. At that moment, Lin Feng had showed that he held an extremely strong power, and everyone had witnessed it. The question was as to how Nan Gongling was going to answer Lin Feng's actions. He had given Lin Feng the answer he had wanted. Wuxia had tried to hand Lin Feng over to Lin Qian and Chu Zhanpeng. He hadn't gotten involved in the incident at that time. He had thought that an ordinary disciple wasn't worth creating a dispute with an elder, so he had just watched from the sidelines. But this time was different. Wuxia had wanted to kill Lin Feng again, and Nan Gongling had stopped him. It was only because Lin Feng had shown that he was truly a genius and proved it by returning with such an incredible increase in power. Nan Gongling now knew about the precipice of Zhanggu, so he was always going to value Lin Feng. Protector Bei had told him about it when he had wanted to kill Wuxia. Wuxia had been humiliated, but Nan Gongling had actually helped him in a way. Did Wuxia really want to continue making this talented young disciple his enemy? But was that enough for Lin Feng? Obviously it wasn't. Lin Feng was not satisfied at all. Would he really let someone who had made so many attempts on his life get away with only a slap in the face? When the ferocious beasts had attacked the sect, Wuxia simply handed Lin Feng over to them without hesitation. Lin Feng didn't believe that Nan Gongling was not aware of these actions. Nan Gongling may have been able to overlook these incidents, but could the same be said about Lin Feng? Just a moment ago, while in the presence of everyone, Wuxia had wanted to kill Lin Feng again, and Nan Gongling had seen it with his own eyes. Had Nan Gongling punished Wuxia? Everyone had the impression that he had, but in Lin Feng's eyes, he had just humiliated Wuxia. Was Nan Gongling just trying to make Lin Feng feel grateful for this minor kindness and make him serve the sect? Lin Feng had never been a servile person. This was his second life, and he had almost died at the hands of Wuxia too many times. Were Nan Gongling's words enough? They were too far from being enough. An elder was an elder, and an ordinary disciple was just an ordinary disciple, but because Lin Feng had proved to everyone that he was a genius, he was now an elite disciple. There is only one solution to this problem. If Wuxia remains in this sect, then I will make my own path. However, if he is no longer within the sect, then I will stay, thought Lin Feng. He knew that Nan Gongling and the Yunhai sect had to choose one person. If they chose him, then he would dedicate his life to the Yunhai sect. If they chose Wuxia, then not only would he leave the sect, but he would return one day to take his revenge. Because of the hatred that he held for Wuxia, there was no longer a peaceful solution. If the Yunhai sect was unable to choose him over Wuxia, then he had no other choice but leave the sect. Lin Feng didn't say what he was thinking. He had hoped that Nan Gongling would choose him when the time came. This was only the beginning of the grudge between them. During the elite disciple exam, Lin Feng had already planned how to take care of Wuxia. Lin Feng stepped down from the fighting stage and looked determined. Each of his steps were filled with firm determination. Nan Gongling was observing Lin Feng's eyes and thought that he looked very mysterious. It was not surprising that this young disciple would have some secrets, as many exceptional talents did. How strong and mysterious! If I was that strong, I would act the same way that he does. Even if there were 10 disciples who would join me to fight against him, we wouldn't be able to win. Lin Feng. I'll remember that name. Why would you remember his name? He wouldn't even recognize you. He's on a completely different level to us. We are just ordinary disciples. Even the highest rank Chan is nothing in comparison with him. None of the ordinary disciples are as strong as him. Lin Feng and Chan are worlds apart. Two disciples were talking loudly amongst themselves, but didn't know that not far away was someone who looked furious. That person was precisely Chan, who was the top-ranked ordinary disciple. He was the one who had provoked Lin Feng in the Xingchan pavilion, and who had been humiliated by Lin Feng. I'm the best amongst all the ordinary disciples. Chan was thinking about the words he had said to Lin Feng in the Xingchan pavilion. Chan had nowhere to hide from the shame he felt from saying those words to Lin Feng. Even though these two disciples were harsh with their words, it was the truth. Chan was nothing in comparison with Lin Feng. Yu Hao was an elite disciple with a sword spirit, and he had been killed in a single strike. Maybe he has forgotten about me completely, thought Chan, feeling hopeless while trying to understand his situation. He was terrified that Lin Feng would seek him out and kill him. Lin Feng didn't attach any importance to Chan, and had actually forgotten about him. An ordinary disciple who kept repeating that he was the best amongst all the ordinary disciples probably had limited mental abilities. You're so much stronger than me that it's actually incredible, said Han Man, who saw Lin Feng. Why was Han Man always so enthusiastic? Lin Feng, you are really incredible, said Jingyun, impressed. She was wondering how Lin Feng practiced and hoped she would get the chance to join him. The disciples surrounding them envied that little group of friends. Han Man and the others were all ordinary disciples, but they were very close friends with Lin Feng. They were probably going to mutually benefit from Lin Feng's rise in status. Han Man and the others also felt happy to have such a friend. They were thinking that it was too bad that they hadn't met him sooner. Lin Feng shrugged and asked Han Man while smiling, "When are you getting onto the fighting stage?" Good thing that there is nobody on the fighting stage because of your display. It seems like now it's my turn, said Han Man while smiling. He then moved towards the life and death arena. Because Lin Feng had just created a huge uproar when he unleashed his power, Han Man felt less pressure to go onto the stage. Everybody was waiting to see what Han Man would do once he got onto the stage. The thing which shocked the crowd even more was that Han Man, like Lin Feng, had no clue how to be subtle. He surprisingly stepped onto the highest fighting stage. Everyone, including Lin Feng, was shocked. What a brave guy. I did not really think about these things beforehand. Does anyone of the first Ling Qi layer want to come and fight me? Han Man was standing on the fighting stage as he asked the crowd. His manner of speaking sounded so rude that everybody was speechless. He was either completely clueless or he was indeed another genius. Lin Feng had challenged 2 elite disciples at the same time, but he knew what he was doing, and he had chosen his own opponents. Han Man was the complete opposite of Lin Feng. He didn't know any elite disciples' names, and was challenging anyone who wished to fight against him. This was the first time that such a thing had happened in the whole of the sect's 1,000-year history. Lin Feng was speechless as he stared shocked at Han Man. His jaw had hit the floor and he was stupefied by Han Man's actions. He Jingyun couldn't help but giggle. That big goofball was hopeless. The entire arena was completely silent for a while until an elite disciple stepped onto the fighting stage and said, "All right, I'll fight against you. Thank you, my name is Han Man. I'm Wang Han. I like people who are quick to accept a challenge. Let's fight," said Han Man while laughing loudly. An extremely strong qi emerged from the earth beneath his feet. In the blink of an eye, Han Man's body had transformed and looked like it was made completely from compact earth. In the life and death arena at this moment, he was one with Mother Earth and Mother Earth was one with him. He had completely fused with the earth and become a symbiotic force. Boom! Han Man took a step forward and the entire arena began to shake under his feet. It sounded like a 1,000-foot giant was walking and each of his steps made the ground tremble. The disciples who were watching from the crowd felt their hearts begin to race, some with excitement and others with fear. An incredible force suddenly crashed onto Wang Han's body, and it felt like he was being crushed. He has mastered his use of force too, thought Nan Gongling, whose eyes were sparkling with delight. There were no words to describe his shock and joy. It wasn't surprising that Lin Feng could use forces, but that unknown ordinary disciple could use forces as well. Even though he had to rely on his spirit and clearly didn't understand forces to the same extent as Lin Feng, he could use and control them with an extraordinary strength. He could be regarded as another genius within the sect. Haha, it's incredible. It's fantastic. The Yunhai sect hasn't seen such strong young disciples for many years, and now 2 shocking geniuses have appeared at the same time. Nan Gongling felt an incredible surge of joy in his heart. This was without a doubt his best elite disciple exam. The sect would actually rise to new heights within his generation. In the Shuiyu country there were a great number of sects and clans fighting for supremacy. Achieving power was not an easy thing to do as the competition was fierce. In the Shuiyu country there were a great number of sects and clans fighting for supremacy. Achieving power was not an easy thing to do as the competition was fierce. The Imperial clan was the strongest clan that existed in the whole Shuiyu country. They were so powerful that nobody dared to challenge their authority. There was no room to question the authority of the Imperial clan. Apart from the Imperial clan, there are also some other extremely powerful clans in the Imperial city. There were the Yu clan of the Imperial city, the Yu clan and the Wanshou Men clan. Outside of the Imperial city there were also the extremely strong sects which held a great deal of power. The Yunhai sect and the Haoyu sect were both strong sects which were outside of the Imperial city's borders. There was also the Luoxia sect as well as the Ice and Snow Mountain village. There are 8 high officials of the Shuiyu country who represent the strongest and the most gifted young cultivators within the country. Everyone who is within those 8 officials is incredibly strong and has advanced to a high level of cultivation. The future of the country was held by these 8 young cultivators. The Yunhai sect was a great power, but it did not have anyone who qualified for a position as one of the 8 high officials. Even though a high official was extremely powerful and had an incredibly high status, it wasn't enough to affect the foundation of a sect. However, in 10 or 20 years that may not be the case. The foundation may be strong, but over time it can be shaken. Nan Gongling clearly understood how things worked with the politics of the country. Even if there was no sign of a sect declining in power, what about its future prospects? What if there were no suitable successors to take the place of patriarch? What if the general power of the sect members declined? If these events happened over an extended period of time, then the end of the sect was inevitable. The effects would not show in the short term. However, in the long term it was clear that the sect would fade from existence. This was the case of the Yunhai sect at the moment. The general level of strength that the young disciples of the Yunhai sect possessed was clearly in decline. Over the years they were attracting less and less talented individuals. How could Nan Gongling not be worried in such circumstances? This was something which troubled him for every second of every day. The fact that Lin Feng and Han Man stood before him and unleashed such spectacular talent. He has once again regained hope. He could feel that the fate of the Yunhai sect was changing and it could possibly have a prosperous future. Lin Feng had incredible fighting power and his talent was truly unfathomable. He was a genius. With more time and dedication to practice, he could become one of the 8 high officials. This would create a bright new future for the Yunhai sect. With him they would rise in power once again. The Yunhai sect was going through a period of prosperity during these peaceful times. However, if a conflict came about, then they would be in a very dangerous position. The sect was currently in decline and its strength paled to that of the past generations. I hope that they can both climb to the top of the hierarchy within the Yunhai sect, thought Nan Gongling while looking at Han Man on the fighting stage. In the Imperial City, the construction of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu had already started and he now had these talent to nurture. Wasn't this a good omen? Boom! Han Man took another step. In the life and death arena there were waves of yellow sand which were surrounding and covering Wang Han. He was struggling to breathe under such immense pressure. The qi which was being released was so powerful that Wang Han felt like he was being buried alive where he stood. You win. Congratulations on joining the elite disciples, said Wang Han. Wang Han suddenly was able to breathe again. His body felt light and the pressure which was burying him had completely vanished. His eyes were half closed and voice was filled with disappointment in his lack of strength. He had been defeated. He had been humiliated, but he had also gained valuable insight thanks to the battle with Han Man. Haha, brother. Don't be so disappointed. I just exploited the fact that my spirit is very powerful, said Han Man while the qi around his body was slowly disappearing. Han Man looked and sounded honest. It was very hard to find a grudge against such a simple person. He could instantly become friendly with anyone. Thank you, said Wang Han while nodding at Han Man. He turned around and left the fighting stage. The final result was his defeat. That was a humiliation for any elite disciple, and he did not want to stay in the spotlight any longer. Han Man quickly rushed back to Lin Feng and while looking incredibly happy with himself he said, "How was it? I earned everyone's respect, right?" "Not bad," said Lin Feng while smiling and nodding. Han Man had a good grasp of forces which he could control with the help of his spirit. Against somebody of the same level, Han Man clearly had a huge advantage in power and understanding. It would be very hard to find a cultivator on his level which could fight equally with him. Only those who possessed incredible talent would have a chance to defeat him. Lin Feng and the others stayed at the Stormy Gorge and continued to watch the other battles. There was always the chance for a cultivator to gain insight from watching a battle. There is not always such a great opportunity to watch so many battles at once. I would like to challenge Tu Fu today. He is extremely strong. I hope that with my power I will be able to defeat him and join the ranks of core disciples. Han Man had eyes filled with awe at the end of the first round and he wasn't the only one. Many disciples were amazed at the battles they had the opportunity to watch. Tu Fu's battle was too amazing. Tu Fu was much too powerful. He had only used one punch which made even the heavens shake and the fight was already over. Lin Feng, do you have anyone that you would like to defeat within the core disciples? Asked Han Man. Me? Asked Lin Feng, surprised. He then shook his head while smiling and said, I haven't thought that far ahead yet. Lin Feng really hadn't thought that far ahead. A great majority of the ordinary disciples of the Yunhai sect were only at the Qi layer. If they wanted to become elite disciples, then they would at least need to have broken through to the Ling Qi layer. The first Ling Qi layer was the minimum requirement for elite disciples. The elite disciples who had broken through to the third Ling Qi layer were exceptionally strong individuals. Those who had broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer would have the qualifications to join the core disciples. However, the core disciples of the fourth Ling Qi layer were considered weak compared to the other core disciple. Those who joined the core disciples also had to go through the same process of defeating one of the current core disciples. However, who were the core disciples? They were the foundation of the sect, and defeating even the weakest of them was not an easy task. Every year, many disciples tried to advance during the elite disciple exam. There was only a single chance for a disciple every year. This exam was the only chance they had to move to a new disciple ranking. There were many elite disciples between the first and the fourth Ling Chi layer. Only the ones with incredible talent or battle power could join the core disciples. Lin Feng had 3 spirits thanks to all the suffering he had been put through. He was thinking about difference between elite disciples and core disciples. Even if he joined core disciples, so what? Wuxia was still an elder and held a huge advantage over him. The first round of the elite disciple exam came to end, and there were many lively discussions happening within the crowd. It was hard for many of the disciples to hold their excitement for the second round, which would be in 3 days' time. All the elite disciples and the core disciples would use all of their power in the upcoming battles, as it would decide their rankings within the sect. Holding the highest ranking within the disciples was an honor for any disciple. Lin Feng didn't want to wait around any longer. He immediately headed towards the practice area for elite disciples. He was now an elite disciple. He needed to get his new disciple robes as well as a certificate of entry into the elite disciples. These were of symbolic of the status a person held within the sect. Lin Feng. At that moment, Lin Feng heard a voice coming from behind which made him stop. He turned around and saw such a beauty running towards him. "What's wrong?" asked Lin Feng to Lu Fei, who was walking towards him. He was a bit surprised to see her. "Can I talk to you in private?" Lu Fei looked embarrassed when she looked at Han Man and the others. Talk in private? Lin Feng was really puzzled. What could Lu Fei have to tell him that required to talk in private? Even though Lin Feng's opinion of Lu Fei had completely changed since she had tried to protect him against Wuxia, his opinion had not changed to such an extent. Were they close enough that they could talk in private? Haha, of course there would be no problem. Lin Feng, we have an important matter to handle now. We will head off first and you can join us later. Lin Feng hadn't said anything yet, but Han Man had already replied for him. He also hastily pulled Pajun and Jing Yun away from the couple. Lin Feng was speechless. Since when had Han Man become so cunning? They had an important matter? What did he mean? Going to receive the elite disciple certificate and a new set of robes? Lu Fei was already standing next to Lin Feng and had become very embarrassed. She quickly said, "Let's move to somewhere private where we can talk." Lin Feng slightly nodded. He was really curious to know what Lu Fei could have to tell him. "Lin Feng, do you remember the first time we met?" "I remember. You almost killed me for no reason on that day," said Lin Feng. That girl's strength was incredible, and there was something hidden deep within her. However, she was really too rash and viscous. "If you hadn't tried to peep on me and do perverted things, then would have I tried to kill you?" said Lu Fei, who was suddenly in a bad mood. "I never peeped on you or had any perverted intentions," replied Lin Feng, who was also growing angry at Lu Fei. On that day, when he had gone into the mountains, it had really been a coincidence. How could she categorically state that Lin Feng was a pervert? Lu Fei saw that Lin Feng wasn't going to admit it. That bastard was really evil. Lin Feng actually thought that Lu Fei was really beautiful, but he did not even know she was there. That was a fact. She really was one of the most beautiful girls in the sect though, so it was understandable that many people wanted to peep on her. "Alright, I admit that I was wrong. I misunderstood you. I would like to apologize." Lu Fei was gnashing her teeth and had forced the words out from her mouth. If it was not for her father, she would never have come to Lin Feng. Lin Feng couldn't understand Lu Fei. He stared blankly at her while trying to understand what had just happened. "What are you looking at?" asked Lu Fei. Lin Feng was still staring at her. She was embarrassed and she was blushing, which had caught Lin Feng by surprise. Could it be? "Did you?" Lin Feng was strangely looking at Lu Fei. He was gazing deeply into her beautiful eyes. "Did you fall for me?" Lin Feng had finally managed to say what had come into his mind. He could not stop all of the thoughts that were rushing through his head. Lu Fei was incredibly strange and tomboyish, but she was beautiful and had an interest in Lin Feng. Lin Feng had never had a girlfriend, so he couldn't help but feel very embarrassed at his current situation. Lu Fei was stunned. She had finally lost her temper and shouted, "You bastard!